We'll get started shortly, folks. Thank you for joining us.
And it looks like we are officially live on Facebook.
Okay. Okay, well,
So for anyone who is calling in to the meeting and not on a Zoom app, could you please mute your phone physically just so that we don't hear anyone? If it ends up being too distracting, unfortunately, we're gonna have to basically kick you off the meeting. So.
what do you say, Matt? Time to get started?
Absolutely.
No. Good afternoon, everyone. We are very excited that that you are able to join us for our second Museum Pests public presentation session. Our first event last year was well attended. We had about 300 people joining us live via Zoom or Facebook. And the video of those presentations are available on the Museum Pests YouTube channel. They've been viewed over, I think, 450 times since then. And so if you want to catch up on what you missed last year, you're welcome to check that out. It's available both through the MuseumPests.net conference page and our YouTube channel. But we have some updates on things that were even presented last year and a new slate of presentations that we're excited about. But as we wait for a few more people to log on, we just wanted to welcome everyone and give you a little bit of information about our group and our site and how we operate. Matt, do you want to tell everybody who the Museum Pest Working Group is and a little bit about how we organize?
Sure, absolutely. Well, and my welcome to everyone as well. If you don't know me, I'm Matt Micklitz. Able to be co-chair with Rachel, who spearheaded this. And yeah, happy to be here and see so many faces, familiar faces, new faces. So, and that's kind of defines Museum Pests, I think, right? We, in a nutshell, we have many familiar faces from many years ago, but we also welcome many new faces each year. And we're really a true ad hoc organization that from many institutions worldwide, which is a point of pride that I like to always brag about when I talk about Museum Pests. And you see us on the screen in a couple different locations. Of course, unfortunately, over the past 2 years, it's been staring at screens at each other. But you see us at the Met, on the steps at Cambridge or Harvard. We've been at Yale. We've been at Winterthur, where I'm sitting right now. I was proud to be able to present or to, should I say, host it here or one of our meetings. And so we do meet annually. We have our yearly around this time of the year meeting where we all can gather and work on the website, MuseumPests.net. And that's ultimately our big driving force and our big point of gathering is to improve and advance the website for the better and provide some awesome content, valuable content for the museum and similar institutions that are looking for answers for their IPM problems or just looking to get a head start into the world of IPM. So we hope we do a good job. We like to think we do. That's not time wasted. I certainly don't think it is. It's a wonderful group to work with. And hopefully, again, you'll get something out of it today and in the future.
So as Matt said, our group really is a group of professionals who come together every year. And as we work through our own issues, we're creating and sharing those resources online on our website. Our grateful thanks goes out to Leon Zach of Zach Software, who is the driving force behind the site and the pest list, which so many of you are on. And our group includes entomologists, collection managers, registrars, curators, conservators, scientists, pest management professionals, facility managers, vendors, really all of the roles that you need to be involved if you have an active and successful integrated pest management plan in your cultural heritage institution. As Matt said, we get together for 2 days every year, whether it's live or on Zoom, and we just completed our 2-day meeting. We hope that some of you who are interested in joining us will reach out to us and let us know about joining us for next year. We have a sort of new look on our website. If you go to the site, you'll see, but we cover all the sort of basic elements of a pest management plan, including prevention, monitoring, identification, and solutions, including some treatment. We have health and safety info. We've present information from other venues and conferences related to IPM. So there's a wealth of information on our site. Some of you who joined us last year will know that in the past we had PDF fact sheets The identification pages and the fact sheet pages are some of the most viewed sections of our website. We know that most people are coming in and finding our site when they have an issue. And last year, we took a big step into moving our fact sheets and our image database into a dynamic format using Airtable. And it may be during our break that we can sort of do a live showing to explain a little bit more. But this new format allows you to filter and sort and hopefully find the information that you're looking for even more easily. Here's another view of the image gallery format. We are, as Matt said, an ad hoc group. Everybody who comes to our meetings is donating their time. When our meetings are in person, they're paying their own way or having their institutions support them. And so for those of you who are able, we would love for you to check out our fundraising appeal on our website. Any money raised through the website goes to support our server costs and other programming costs that keep the site up, available and free for the worldwide community. The other way to access our fundraising campaign is through this link, givebutter.com and /MuseumPests. And I think for those of you who have a cell phone at the ready, Matt created a groovy, it's not even called a barcode, it's a QR code thing.
Sure.
For you to access our page. For some of you who are able to see, I'm also proudly sporting my Museum Pests swag. If you would like, there's hats and shirts and sweatshirts also available, and all the proceeds from those purchases also go to support the Museum Pests website. For those of you who are not already on our pest list is, I believe we're approaching almost 1,000 members worldwide. We've hovered for many years at around 800, and we've seen a bit of a jump. So you can join the pest list. It's a free Google group accessible from our website, where you can discuss your IPM questions and contribute to the worldwide community. I also want to put a plug in for our Spanish-speaking colleagues. We have one presentation at the end of today's session that will be given in Spanish. And we have a full Spanish translation of the website. It sometimes may take some time for the English language content that's changed on the site to be adjusted on Spanish, but virtually all elements of the English site have been translated in Spanish and are available for you there. We are very grateful to colleagues that have spanned multiple continents for the work that they did to create this translation. Without further ado, I'm going to ask if Pascal will share the screen to kick off our first presentation, and then Matt will keep us going from there. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, Pascal.
Okay. Yeah, welcome to my talk. I'm very happy to speak at this conference. I've been to the group meetings a couple of times and they were always inspiring and motivating, and I hope to join you again in the future. I will speak today about a research project, and this project is about This project is about climate change and museum pests. So I don't want to get into detail, but we know that climate changes are taking place at the moment at a global scale. We have an increase of temperature expected for the next couple of years. We have changes in precipitation, and this will increase extreme weather events. Here are some maps that show the annual and summer precipitations that are expected for Europe. And we already see in the last couple of years the increase of extreme flooding events. For example, here are some pictures of the last couple of years in different places in Austria. And of course, everyone knows that the increase of extreme weather events and precipitation can lead to an increase of mold growth. And there has been a project in the past called Climate for Culture, which already looked at some of these aspects of climate change on cultural heritage, on museum buildings, on historic buildings. And they also looked at how mold growth will increase in the future. But in this project, insects were not included. And that gave us the idea. So I speak for myself and my colleagues from Austria, Germany, and Peter Brimblecom, who is located in Asia. So we had the idea to look at climate change and museum pests. So this includes insects, but we will also look at fungi. So here are some papers which have looked at the aspect of climate change and pests. So there have been some publications, but most of them were not from specific research projects, but were just combining climate data and insect data collected in different buildings. In the last months, I published together with Peter Brimblecom 2 papers on the increase of silverfish during the COVID lockdown. So this is already the first results from the project, where we could show that climate changes inside of our buildings during the lockdowns have increased the numbers of silverfish that were caught on the traps. We have thought of a few research questions. So how will climate change affect the indoor climate? And what will happen with our pests? Do we see higher activity, faster development, or reproduction? Will climate change help the spread of new pests across Europe? So we are especially looking at introduced neobiotic species. And how can we prevent damages? How we can optimize insulation, heating, or air conditioning, but at what costs? The project was funded by the Austrian Academy of Science, and it started last summer in July. And so we are within the first half year of the project. We have different model buildings that we are looking at. In total, we are examining the climate, the activity of the insect pests and the fungi of 20 buildings. And we have some historic buildings which are climate regulated with air conditioning. We have historic buildings with only heating. We have modern art storages which have a very good climate. And we have some historic libraries which don't have any climate control. So no heating, no cooling, and no dehumidification. We have placed in the last summer 450 data loggers, and additional 10 data loggers investigate the microclimate. We see a cable here going down to the floor next to the traps, and so we can analyze the microclimate on the floor. Here are some pictures from libraries that we are specifically interested. We see already here inside the shelf fungi growth and the data loggers just next to it. For me, especially the microclimate is of interest. So we placed some traps some data loggers next to traps where we already had in the past high activity of different type of pest species like silverfish, the gray silverfish, or carpet beetles. We will also do for 3 large building climate simulations, which takes into account visitor numbers, solar radiation, window areas, building type, and so on. But this is still ongoing, so I don't have any results on that yet. A PhD student will look at the fungi distribution in all the 20 buildings. So she is responsible for that and has started already a couple of months ago. She will do surface sampling, air sampling, and DNA sampling, which also includes the historic microbiological activity. We also have some laboratory experiments to collect data about the insect pests at standardized temperatures. And my colleague Bill Landsberger from Berlin is responsible for this part in the project. Here are some of the model organisms we are interested. The biscuit beetle, for example, a very important pest for our historic libraries. We will look at the carpet beetle here, the brown carpet beetle, which was introduced in Austria already some years ago, but is quite abundant now. This is the North American wasp beetle, which was introduced only a couple of years ago in our museum. So this is also one of the animals we are especially interested. And of course, we have the gray silverfish, which is one of the most problematic pests that we find at the moment in museums across Austria. Here are some pictures of damage inside of a museum. So now I have a few minutes left for the first results. I just added a couple of pictures and climate loggers. Here is part of my work where I take pictures inside of the rooms which are with an infrared light. And here are some data loggers, some results from the data loggers. You see here this 2 bars are the humidity, and here on the bottom the 2 blue ones are the temperature. So this shows that the external measurements on the floor don't have a very big difference for the temperature and also for the humidity. Here, this is here you see a picture which is measuring the climate within a window. We have those 2 double glass windows in most of the historic buildings in Austria, and you see the high changes of the humidity and also the temperature within the small space of air which is inside of this window. This is also changes of humidity which are quite high, and the logger is here located near an emergency exit of a new storage site. In general, the climate inside of this new museum buildings is very stable and very good, but we see that the door is untight, and this results in high fluctuations of humidity. One of the special areas we are looking at is the top of the historic museum, the main arts museum. So there's a data logger on top here. There's one in the area below. And those are the ones which you might know when entering the museum. This is the restaurant, and this below is the entrance of the Fine Arts Museum here in Vienna. Here we see one of the data loggers with very high humidity measurements. So we have levels of around 90%, and we also see that fungi is already growing in this area. And the temperature goes down in wintertime around 5 degrees centigrade in this area. Compared to that, we have the Natural History Museum, which has now 250 data loggers placed across the museum. And one of the first results that we saw, we have many areas which has very, very dry climate. Until now, the climate was never measured before, but we see here that especially in the winter time, with the heating, we have measurements of 25% relative humidity. So this is already one of the big results, and is definitely a problem for the objects stored in the museum. So thank you for your attention, and I also thank my co-authors and the Austrian Academy of Science for funding this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pascal. That was wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to move on to advancements in remote monitoring for pests in museums, presented by Adrian Doyle. And Adrian, I know you needed your presentation pulled up. 1 second.
Thanks. As I was saying to Matthew, I think Brexit's got in the way of me uploading my presentation, so we'll have to do it from the States. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to give a presentation. Those of you that know me, I've worked in IPM now for over 25 years, and at the end of the month, I will be retiring after having worked 42 years. So this is my end of season presentation. So in conjunction with my colleagues here at the British Museum and Ethan Estabrook in Insects Limited, we wanted to talk to you about the effect, the advances we've been testing on pest monitoring using remote monitoring, because bearing in mind what Pascal has just said, it's quite interesting that environmental levels at pest level may not be the same as environmental levels in another area of the museum. So could I have the next slide, please, Matt? Thank you. So can remote monitoring be useful in the British Museum? And the answer is quite definitely yes. And certainly from my point of view, the project has been unbelievably successful, bearing in mind that we didn't really know how it was going to work with all the complications of ordering from outside of the EU and the UK. But I wanted to give you some idea of what we were able to achieve and also where we think we were going. So can I have the next slide, please, Matt? So just to give you a summary, we've got over 1,000 pest monitors that we manage across 3 sites here in the London area. And these include galleries, stores, workshops, and laboratories. And at the moment, the management of the data is the IPM manager, my responsibility. And the monitoring is undertaken quarterly by the Conservation and Collections Care Team, which is a department of over 70 people, and they're responsible for managing the collection from installation to exhibitions, loans, and obviously store management. We also have non-collections areas, which are obviously those of you that work in heritage organisations, it might be storerooms, packing rooms, whatever. We have over 70 pest monitors, and they're managed by a subcontractor who in turn is managed by the soft services contractor. So on a quarterly basis, we're dealing with over 1,000 bits of data which have to be coordinated. And one of the things I've been looking at over the last 4 years that I've been doing this work is, do we have an opportunity to reduce that workload, but maintain the data capture and standards for collections care? And to that extent, can we use some other technology to take over in targeted areas? So can I have the next slide, please, Matt? And then I don't know how, to be perfectly honest, it must have been a very good piece of promotional literature that I discovered SiteTrap and Foresight IPM. was a project running in the States by Insects Limited. And I contacted them a long time ago to say, would there be an opportunity to run some experiments here in London using this remote technology? And they said, yes, let's go away and think about it. We're not quite sure how it's going to work outside of the US, but let's try it. Next slide, please, Matt. And one of the things I wanted to establish was whether or not there was something that we could take advantage of, bearing in mind the way that the system was presented to us. And those of you that are familiar with certain problems we have in Europe at the moment, we have two primary problems, and that's Tiniola, which is webbing clothes moth, and silverfish. So I wanted to investigate whether there were any hanging monitors that we could use, which would attract with a pheromone webbing clothes moth, and whether or not there were any floor monitors that we could use for crawling insects, whether it were carpet beetle or environmental insects like silverfish. This is where it became really useful to see that this configuration, this technology could have two configurations. And the other main factor with this, which is quite significant, is bearing in mind the lockdown that we've had in Europe and in the UK, and obviously in the States as well. I always thought, wouldn't it be nice if we could have some sort of remote pest monitoring during lockdown? And the answer, of course, is that we manage environmental monitoring using remote telemetric systems. Why couldn't we have a similar kind of approach with pest monitoring? Particularly if something that could be used on the network, cloud-based software, but also a mobile phone app. And in that respect, it was completely transcending what I thought, basically. Can I have the next slide, please, Matt? So after I got approval and the funding from the Information Technology Department, who classified it as a research project, we were able to get funding for 10 monitors to position around the London site here in Bloomsbury. And we decided that there would be a couple of sort of hits, if you like, that would promote the project. First of all, that we would be able to use the site trap in a gallery space where we don't, as a rule, encourage too much pest monitoring unless it's really essential because of the disturbance of the gallery. Obviously, we can't do monitoring during public hours, and very often galleries are actually used out of hours for special tours and VIP events. So it went into what we call the Sainsbury's Exhibition Gallery, which was, at the time, it was showing a Nero exhibition. And you can see the two images showing a site trap hanging behind a curtain, and another one on the right-hand side hanging behind a statue, which coincidentally created an enormous problem because visitor services didn't know what it was, saw a white box with green flashing white lights and wires coming out of it, and actually evacuated the gallery. So a tip there, if you're going to put them in galleries, let your visitor services people know. The other thing that we actually did was we worked in a new installation at one of our Islamic galleries where we had, for some inexplicable reason, moths appearing, webbing clothes moth appearing in behind the showcase void spaces. Bearing in mind it's a new gallery, this was quite disturbing. And then finally, in one of our Greek and Roman galleries, we had an incident where we were getting increased moth counts in a showcase that was beneath an inert object. The gallery historically has a problem, and this was a problem area. And by using some remote system, it meant that we didn't have to take the panel off every week, which would have put the collection under risk because obviously every time you remove a panel, the showcase can wobble. So by having a remote system, we could monitor the space without having to take the panel off. Next slide, please, Matt. So the other part of the system is the software that manages the system, and our IT department provided me with a mobile phone, what you call a cell phone, and also a computer where the software was installed. And through the software, we are able to set up the pest monitors, if you like, the site trap in various locations. The mobile phone is actually used as part of the process setting this up. But perhaps more importantly, the mobile phone is tremendously useful because like a lot of museums, I actually operate on 3 sites. And sometimes to be able to view information remotely via a mobile phone is far more convenient than having to plug in a laptop somewhere or use a standalone process. So from that, you're able to create accounts, locations. You can download reports for looking at and basically combining the software for the app on the mobile phone and the tablet computer provides us with all the information we want. Next slide, please, Matt. This is a slide that I think is absolutely brilliant, which comes from Insects Limited, showing the accumulation of moths on a site trap using time-lapse photography. And one of the advantages of this as well is that you can look at trends. And those of you like Pascal and other people who are looking at trends, the trends might not be linear. In other words, you might have catches of moths that might suddenly explode for no apparent reason. And what is it that's causing the problem? Is it related to something else? Can I have the next slide, please, Matt? And one of the things that I have always subscribed to in all the years I've worked in is any form of remote technology is only as good as the information that it provides. This provides us with an alarm status. So for part of the research, I put a threshold of 1 insect on a trap. If one insect was found, it would go into alarm status and show me where there was a problem. The other thing that I particularly liked was, if you look at the columns, you can see that you can do it over a period of a week, a month, or a total count. The software also includes when it was last maintained. In other words, when did you change the battery? When did you change the pheromone or whatever? And the battery status is the column on the right-hand side. Can I have the next slide, please, Matt? Thanks. And the other thing is that what the site trap does, which I think is particularly significant, is it has humidity and temperature sensors built into the system. Now, bearing in mind what Pascal was just saying, very often the environmental conditions that you're monitoring in your space may not be where the pest problem is. So having a RH&T sensor near the site, well, as part of the site trap process, means that those of you that remember the picture of the showcase in the Greek and Roman gallery, that's 1 cubic meter. We're able to monitor the temperature and humidity in that space, which is significantly different from the ambient environment of the gallery. And therefore, that might be an indication of an environmental problem rather than it something to do with other activities like air movements and things like that. So in that respect, I think that's particularly advantageous. If you look at the center of that screen, you will see 2 spikes which show where the insects were found. The green graph, if you like, the green wobbly line is actually the environmental conditions. So as part of the process, you can see whether the insect population or the trends are actually related to the environmental information. And the environmental data is captured on the right-hand side in the second box on the right. Can I have the next slide, please, Matt? So what's it for? Well, I certainly agree with using monitoring in hard to reach areas. It's certainly hugely advantageous in critical areas. And we're actually working with our facilities, well, I'm in FM, but our subcontractors, to put them in plant rooms and high risk areas where normally we wouldn't be allowed to enter regularly. It certainly has an advantage of freeing up time because the data is live. It means that we can correct problems quickly. So in the effect that you suddenly find an increase of moths, you're not waiting a quarter or 3 months or whatever to actually find out whether or not you've got a problem. So it's like a humidity and temperature sensor in a showcase or a gallery. You've got instant information, which is delivered to you on a daily basis. Certainly can be used in galleries and stores. There's no question that I propose that it will stay in some stores that belong to the loans and display team. And that might be super for loans obligations or loans contracts where we're providing continuous information. As I said earlier, hard to reach spaces might not be just a showcase. It might be a plant room, but it actually might be something that's simply physically very difficult to get to. or you might have a series of alarms or other things that get in the way of you having a more spontaneous approach. Bearing in mind what I said earlier, the fact that the environmental conditions are monitored by the trap, it might be that the trend, the environmental trend, is the key player in why you've got such a problem. And I think that it's certainly in having your environmental data very close to where your pest trap is as an enclosed all combined unit is a significant advantage, rather than having to do the kind of thing that Pascal's talking about, which is very time consuming, where you have to put standalone data loggers, or if you've got a telemetry system, actually put all your telemetry, spare telemetry loggers, if you like, in the location where your pest trap is. And certainly it doesn't necessarily always work. So in summary then, I haven't got a summary slide. I think it's an opportunity. I think that one of the things I have always thought of is whether or not these kinds of technologies can be combined. Wouldn't it be lovely if there was an all-inclusive temperature, humidity, lux, UV, sound, moth trap, crawling beetle trap, or whatever, that can all use a SQL database or something like that, that could all go on one system, so that you would have a combined piece of data, which obviously ties in with your preventive conservation standard. The other thing that we are considering here at the moment is, without mentioning any company names, we actually use a remote telemetry system for monitoring our temperature and humidity and lux and UV levels. The software enables us to put other information in it, and we're looking at the possibility of whether or not we could include this data directly into our environmental database, so that when you pull a report, you could potentially put your IPM data in it as well. So we've run out of time. I'd like to say thank you very much for being invited to the conference. Thank you very much to my colleagues at the British Museum and my colleagues in Insects Limited. And as we say in England, cheerio, and until next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. So next we have Davison Chihuahua that's joining us all the way from Zimbabwe, and we're going to pull his presentation up and be doing much the same as Addie with directing slides on our end. So I think Rachel will be pulling that one up.
Yep, give me 1 second here.
No problem.
As I load this, I want to express my thanks to Adi for an amazing career as and he's been an amazing colleague, and we wish you well in the next phase of your adventures. And to let people know that when we don't have time for questions, we hope that you'll put your questions into the chat, and hopefully our speakers can answer some of those via chat or live online during our break. And without further ado, let's see. Just need to
Hello, colleagues. Hello, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Hi, Davison. We can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi.
Okay. My name is Davison Chihuahua, and my research partners are Sheena O'Connell, Maggie Lobser, and Isabel McGinn. As you can see on the screen, that's the title of our research, which is Preventive Conservation and Pesticide Use, Investigating Potentially Contaminated Ornithology and Mammalogy Collections in Zimbabwe's Museums. A preliminary survey that we conducted in some of these museums has shown that there is widespread use of pesticides on artifacts. Can we move over to the next slide? Some of the chemicals that are used are naphthalene and gas toxin. However, there are other pesticides whose names we could not establish because of inadequate documentation. The next slides will show the extent to which some of the artifacts are contaminated by pesticides. Can you move over to the next slide? The white powder and the blue powder that you see in that artifact, these are pesticides that have been applied directly to the artifact. Can we move over to the next slide? As you can see in those cabinets, that white powder that you can that is coming there, there are also pesticides that have been applied on the artifacts. And within the storage rooms, there is foul smell, which is coming from the pesticides that we are seeing there. Let's move over to the next slide. And another slide. Looking at the historical treatment of the collection, the museums in Zimbabwe have got collections that date back to the 18th and 20th centuries. However, we do not know the historical treatment of these collections, some of which have been collected from across the globe in Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, and the United States, but we do not have a complete record of their treatment. Let's move over to the next slide. So as a result of this, working in collaboration with the Tangible Heritage Conservation Program at the University of Pretoria, we have set to analyze the collections at the Natural History Museum of Zimbabwe to determine the chemical contaminants that are on the collections. And the methods that we are using are XRF as well as chromatography. The next slide. And the goal for this research is that we would like to establish safety protocols for the handling and use of contaminated collections to facilitate safe research and learning at the museum. We would also want to label contaminated collections so that when they are used, people would adopt safety precautions to protect themselves. We are also working towards coming up with affordable integrated pest management methods, which limits the use of pesticides in controlling pests in the museums. So that's our goal. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you for your time, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Davison. That was excellent. And I'm glad it worked out for us.
Thank you. Finally, it did work out. Yes.
Okay, so next we have Armando Mendez, who will be presenting.
Matt, before Armando jumps in, we're a little ahead of schedule. Do we want to take a few minutes to see if anybody has a question for Davison to throw into the chat?
Sure.
Keep your slide up, Armando, so that it's ready to go. And if anybody wants to ask a question.
Rachel, I'm kind of curious what kind of pests that Davison is seeing in Zimbabwe.
Okay. Thank you so much for your question. The pesticides that we have so far discovered, like I have highlighted, The most common of it is naphthalene. Then we also have other pesticides such as gas toxin, which are being used in the museums. But we have tested some of the collections using chromatography, but we are yet to analyze the results. When the time comes, I will publish the results of our analysis of the collections. But there is something that is so much interesting from what we've discovered so far.
Davison, have you identified which insects are the ones that have been the primary concern in damaging your collection? For instance, Adi said that in the UK, they're most concerned, in his institution, for instance, with webbing clothes moths and silverfish. Have you identified?
Yes. Silverfish has been a problem. We've also had problems with termites affecting especially our wooden collections. So these are some of the pests that are affecting the collections here.
Thank you. If anybody has a question for one of our previous speakers, Pascal or Adi, we can also field some of those. I think we might want to stick to our schedule just so if people are logging in, that we don't confuse people of where we are in our order of presentations.
There was a question that came through from Adi, and we just seems like we might have gotten a little off track. So I just want to verify. Someone asked whether the monitors, for those remote monitors, whether they were individually battery charged or if you plugged them in. And so I think
they're battery charged. They come with chargers. It takes a couple of hours for them to charge up, and they last 3 months. Which is the perfect timing because, well, certainly in the UK, the moth pheromone lures we use only last 3 months anyway, and we actually monitor quarterly. So I put them out and change the lures and everything and the batteries all on the quarterly basis. Certainly, I haven't had any batteries run any less than a quarter, and in fact, more often than not, they will last a week or so afterwards. So in terms of timing and how it all ties in, it all works extremely well. And of course, for what's the word? Environmental sustainability, you're not chucking batteries away.
We should let people know, in addition to Adi, we do have colleagues from Insects Limited on the session today. So keep the questions coming through the chat.
Yeah, to be honest, Rachel, I was going to say that I need to, I'm still at work. I need to go home because we've got an underground strike here in London. So perhaps Ethan could take over in the 10 minutes or so and answer the questions on behalf of our presentation, yeah?
Sounds good, Adi. Thank you.
Davison, I did have a quick question about the collections in terms of the natural history type of collections. What type of I noticed there are some birds and some different type of skins. What's the scale we're talking about? Like how large of collections of these types of animal skins and pelts?
Oh, thank you for your question. We are talking about thousands of animal and bird skins. It is it's actually one of the largest natural history museums in Africa, the Natural History Museum of Zimbabwe. So it has got thousands of these skins in their storage facilities.
I'm just thinking about some of the things I just keep at home in my drawers when it comes to natural materials. We don't have too many at Winterthur that in terms of furs or feathers compared to that.
Yes. So in terms of the research that we are doing, yes, we are working with a limited sample. If time and resources permit, we would need to expand the number of our collections at the museum to ascertain the extent of contamination of these collections. But there are so many collections to work on in the museum.
Thank you all for answering your questions. I think, Matt, shall we give Armando the go-ahead?
Sure. Okay, Armando, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Rachel. I hope you can all hear me okay. My name is Armando Mendez. I work at the Natural History Museum in London. I just listening to Adi talking about the potential of integration of every possible data that will have an implication on IPM. I hope Adi is still there because I'm about to make you very happy, I hope. So Digital Twin is an initiative. This is quite modern. This has only been going on for about a year and a half. Perhaps a little longer, but I've been only involved in this project for about a year and a half, maybe a year. So Digital Twin is this. As a concept, is pretty much creating a digital version of a reality. It's something that is used in Formula One, for example, where a computer model can recreate perfectly Formula One car. And then a program, normally an artificial intelligence program, will fire variables at that digital version of the car, and they can analyze how it will respond under different conditions, the wear and tear. This allows Formula One managers to prepare for replacements, to calculate how much it's going to cost to run that car, when it's due for certain repairs on certain parts, etc., etc. So you can start to see the potential applications of such a concept. So you have a physical reality with your assets and processes and systems, and you have a digital mirror image of that reality, and you can apply data, and you can run different computer models through it, and even predict the future. So these are some of the goals of the museum, and securing the future of our collection is, as you see, number one priority goal. So with this in mind, and with these strategies, I'm gonna run through these slides a bit fast. Sorry about that, just because this was part of a longer talk. But we try to bring together different data sets and a large amount of data that we collect in the museum to try to improve efficiency. A lot of that data is environmental data, for example, which is highly relevant to IPM. And the idea is to take the digital pulse of the museum. the mantra behind the digital twin is, as you see, if you don't measure it, you can manage it. So with the idea in mind, I was approached by Eleanor Kohler, who I'm very thankful to for letting me use her talk and this work that she's done. And she was interested in first knowing what kind of IPM data I was storing and I was custodian of. And I say, well, we have well over 20 years of IPM data in our EMU database. And she said, oh, can I take a look at that? And I say, yeah, sure, go ahead. Because what she wanted to do was to try and predict pest occurrences. So when they were going to happen and in what numbers and what level of risk to our collections and where. So she thought this was a great problem to try to crack, and it will address a key issue with the museum core value of protecting the collections. So the approach was that first of all, she needed the data, so I just gave her access. That was easy. But then they had to clean it up a bit and explore it, and that's where things became complicated because they are not specialists on IPM. So there was a lot of talk with them every week, trying to explain to them what a different type of insects are, how the database is structured, what's an ecotype, what is DC2/4 XYZ, which might be a location in the museum, etc., etc. So once we started to get some sense of the data, Eleanor decided that she wanted to implement different models. So there was a lot of look at relative humidity data as well. Our data system for Natural History Museum is called LTEC. Some of you might be familiar with it, and it covers almost 90% of the museum. However, as you well know, with relative humidity and temperature data, it's very localized. So some of the rooms in the museum are huge, some are small, and the reading that you get only from one very specific location in that room, which might be huge. So that was something that Eleanor had to work with. So yeah, this is what Eleanor had to crack, and it was a crash course for her on IPM and conservation, environment conservation, preventive conservation and environments in museums. And this is what the data that she collected looked like. And I'm hoping Thomas Strang is listening, and I think he's going to enjoy this. I'm thick as a well omelette, so I don't understand any of these graphics or any of these numbers, but apparently there is a lot of clustering and there is a lot of playing with the data. And I know the data scientists were having a lot of fun with it because, you know, we are dealing with biologicals and they are more unpredictable and they're just a lot more fun to work with than your average data set. So she was playing a bit with the relative humidity data. Actually, what we decided was that we were going to narrow it down and select a very specific location in the museum. So they asked me which data would be the most complete, and I say DC2 because that's where we've been trapping more consistently, and also some of my best trappers, and they're all incredibly good, but I've got some trappers that are just absolutely extra good and geniuses in their own right, and they work really hard and the data is consistent. So we chose DC2 also because they're very delicate collections. There is where the cocoons and the botanical and entomological collections are there. And the magic, and I'm going to be very brief now, that happened was that what Eleanor managed to do was take that data for DC2 and then do a blind test. and asked the system, the computer program that she was using, to try to make predictions that we knew the result of. And this is pretty much what she got. So this is the perfect prediction line. And as you see, the model did pretty good predictions. Apparently, the error for our model is 2.7 compared with a typical error of 4.4, 4.5 if you only ever guess. So that was very good. And what's the application of this? You were my ask and people was asking me. So the application of this, the possibility of having accurate or relatively accurate predictions of what pests are going to do is that I can prepare for it. So say, for example, the model tells me that it's going to be a huge explosion of certain type of pests that might be especially affected by humidity or debris in a specific area of the museum. I can divert resources towards that. Say, for example, I could tell states, hey guys, can you heat up this building a couple of degrees extra for the next 2 months? Because look, this very intelligent model is telling me that we're gonna have this particular pest in this area and is a huge risk for this collection, which is next to it. And that way we could save money on energy, which is much needed these days because things we all know. And yeah, just generally will make my work a lot easier. So the next steps are integrating also weather data and visitor data from outside, which is we think is going to help narrowing those predictions. And blah, blah, blah. There is a lot of scientific data scientist talk that I don't understand. But yeah, this is my talk and I hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks so much, Armando. Yeah, thanks for sticking to time. You did a wonderful job there too. We're still managed to be ahead. So yeah, if there's any questions, I see a couple popping up of at least commentary in the chat. So yeah, if you have any questions for Armando, you put it in the chat or hop on and speak up. That'd be just fine.
Armando, it's Adrian from the British Museum of London. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hi.
This is really interesting, and bearing in mind what you said, obviously, if we can combine data together with all sorts of things, then we've got a one-stop shop, if you like. To what extent do you think that this will also help you with sort of modelling funding and budget control? Because if we can use seasonal variations and say you've got an annual spend, it might be that you know that you're going to need more resources, say in Q3 of the year or something like that. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, it is a fair thing to say. And actually that's the ultimate goal of the project. DigiTwin employs an external consultant who is an expert on artificial intelligence. So the idea is to have artificial intelligence running all these models and telling you what the predictions are on all sorts of variables, including funding and potential expenditure in, I don't know, as deep into the future as you want the model to try to venture. Sorry, I hope that answered your question, Adi.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Sorry, I had my mute on. It does answer the question. I'm also thinking of not just annual spend, like 5 years down the line. If do you think you could possibly use this for modelling in a new building?
As I say, it's artificial intelligence, so the potential for it is kind of unlimited. Anything that you can transform into data and feed the model as much information as you have about what happened in the past, literally anything. Yeah, it could be used for preventive conservation building, anything that you can think of. That's the idea. The applications are, well, your imagination is the limit. There is a question by Lisa Goldberg in the chat. If you can use the pest index data analysis that Jane Henderson developed to manage your data at the input end. I don't know. As I say, I'm not the data scientist. All the people do that, just a humble IPM coordinator. But my guess is that yes, you can. You can pretty much adapt any data set or any type of index that you create. You can. These programs are incredibly adaptable and very flexible. So if one program doesn't work, they will use a different one and it will work. Yeah, I'm pretty. Yes, nothing humble about IPM. Yeah, we run, so we just try to keep it, low key. Okay, so
Great. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening. I'm very grateful. It's great to be here.
And yeah, just a reminder now, I might as well make the reminder now, we'll make it later, that we will have a recording of all these sessions on our YouTube channel. They generally stick around our Facebook as well. So, so don't worry if you missed it, or if you want to pass it on to colleagues, or if there's something, you want to go back and look at. And of course, I wouldn't doubt that most of our presenters, I can speak for myself, but most of our presenters would probably be happy to share in the future if you contact them. Pest List is always a great place to go to and get the info too and ask about it. Okay, so we're getting right back on schedule, and next we have Nicholas. Welcome, and yeah, so we'll sit back and take it in. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
I can, yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Matt and Rachel, for having me or us. We have a solution for treating artworks which are infested by insects. So I'll briefly talk about that. A lot of you know this method already, and I hear that it's raising some interest in the US because it's not really used over there, and that's of course a nice thought. Now I'll run you through some technical basics. I'll show you what we treat all the time and what can be treated. And there's a nice little case study of 16 Emily Brzezinski sculptures, massive, big wooden sculptures. She's an American artist. You probably know her. And so there's this little video, and we have expanded our research and our application of the method to extracting biocides from artworks. And this is particularly interesting in context what Davidson presented just half an hour ago. So it's pretty straightforward. Insects die when it gets too warm. It's the same with you. You would also die if you were exposed to 55 degrees for a certain time. But the lethal temperature starts much earlier. We've recently completed a research project on this with 2 entomological societies in Germany, and this was published in the Pest Odyssey proceedings. And in our chambers, the warming up and cooling down happens very slowly. And the key factor is relative humidity. You need to control that based on the so-called Calvert diagram, so that you have no exchange of humidity between the objects and the surrounding air. Exceptions are very few of materials we can't treat. For instance, we wouldn't treat parchment. Some animal skins we don't treat. would be careful with some very early plastics. But that, as I said, is just a few material groups. This is the Calvert diagram, which basically tells you that if you have an object at, say, 18 degrees centigrade here, it's stored at 55% relative humidity, and you warm that up to 55, which is higher than we usually do. Then you, at the same time, have to raise the relative humidity to around about 65%. And if you do that, you maintain the EMC. Slow heating phase, slow, then a certain holding phase and a slow cooling phase. The entire process takes between, I don't know, 14 to 24 hours. So it's a very quick treatment method. What can we treat? Polychrome wooden objects. This is a 15th century altarpiece, which we have treated in Brussels. This was in the London Chamber, very early Gothic Madonna, beautiful piece. Again, polychrome gilded objects. Paintings we treat a lot, especially in Brussels, as they have so many Flemish masters. This is one example. It's a painting by the Flemish painter Van Dyck. This is in the chamber, and it was in this altar. And the back of the painting, because the wall was wet, attracted anobium and also quite a lot of mold, which had settled on the back of the canvas. Then there's a lot of contemporary art and modern art. I would say that in the London Chamber by now, we treat about 50% of the objects we treat are actually contemporary art. This is artworks from Tate, which we've treated. This is Berlinde de Broekere. She's a Belgian artist. Textiles, of course. Jamie Lightfoot was good enough and nice enough to let us use this photo. This is some leather object we have treated from her collection. Of course, a lot of ethnological collections. Taxidermy, natural history specimens. This is a Belgian artist, and he sticks these are real beetles, and he sticks them to this frame, and he creates costumes. And the beetles had been attacked because entomological collections are generally attacked quite a lot. Then books, libraries, musical instruments, furniture. And this question always pops up, whether we can treat composite surfaces, composite materials. And yes, we can. There's no changes in these objects. And this is the little video I was telling you about, which demonstrates how easy the whole thing is. So yeah, that was the little video. This was in Valencia, as you saw, and it was in our mobile chamber. We have a chamber on wheels. And this is the other thing I was telling you about, because biocide residues in collections are a huge problem, not only in Europe, but also in the US and also everywhere, also in Asia. Arsenic, mercury, naphthalene, PCB, PCP, DDT, lindane, these are just some of the key pesticides which have been sprayed onto the collections. And we are doing a research project together with Boas. He's a chemist near Frankfurt, and he's really the guy when it comes to contaminated collections. And this is a test cabinet we use because we don't want to waste all the energy in our big chambers, but this replicates our big chambers to a certain degree at least. And these are some results. Of course, I picked the good ones because unfortunately it's not as next to perfect as this one. Some results are different. You even have different depletion rates in different kinds of wood, which is quite interesting. It probably has to do with the salt content in wood. But we've only just started this research study about a year ago. But you can see that, for instance, lindane this is Douglas fir, that lindane could actually be reduced by 95%, and after one day already by 90%, which is of course very, very good. And Armando, you introduced this AI project, and we're doing the same thing with a big data company near Brussels. They will feed all of this into some computers. This really, I can't get my head around it, but it's very important. And I think that's the end of my presentation, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nico. That was fascinating. And I literally just talked about this method or heat treatment methodology with our director yesterday at lunch.
Oh, really?
Jaws always drop at the idea of heat to, as you said, in the States, it's just something that we just haven't adopted readily at all. So I had a very captivated audience, though, the right audience. So
right, yeah, of course.
Okay, so we have, see if we have any, we do have a couple of questions from Eric Breitong. How do you measure how much pesticide is left in the woodblock?
There's two ways. There's the XRF, and there's gas chromatography. So we're actually taking samples, at least if the object allows for that, to take samples. So there's lab or XRF. But this is really, I must make that, I'm not a chemist, but Eric, if you're interested, I'm sure that because Boaz is really the guy to talk to, I'm absolutely happy to introduce you to, if you like, and you can ask him.
And we have a question from 80. How do you choose the levels which are safe to handle after treatment?
To handle, sorry?
I think he's asking what levels of contamination are left, what are safe to handle after post-treatment.
Is that biocides, or is that the temperature in for the treatments?
Biocides, the biocides.
Well, that's a very good question. You can really only counter this or do these treatments at all if you have like really big filter system, active charcoal filter system included in the treatment cycle, because it's a fact that elevated temperature in connection with humidity, which we control, and in connection with wind speed, all these factors play together. They will definitely mobilize pesticides, which are in a lot of the artworks we treat, not in all of them, but in a lot of them. So that must absolutely be taken into account. And but this is, again, like the safety aspect of it, this is something which is also in the research project in a very prominent space. Oh, here comes Eddie. What I meant is the levels remaining in the object. Okay, yeah, that's another aspect yet of our study, because these values have not been established yet. but we're working together with he's actually, he's a toxicologist from the uni in Freiburg, where I live, just around the corner. And he's a pathologist, and he's an expert on poisons and the effect of various poisons on the human metabolism. Now, of course, he's probably done research on different poisons than the ones we are going to look at. But of course, there's a connection there. So we will actually, our goal is that we will be the ones, if you want, who actually establish the safe value, because nothing like that exists.
Great. That's yeah, absolutely fascinating. Good. Thank you so much again, Nico.
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, so yeah, we're ahead by about 2 minutes or so. But next we have Fabiana Bertoni going to be presenting to us, and whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for having me today. My presentation kind of flows nicely on from Nico's. So I just want to acknowledge my co-authors, Nicola Compton and Adrian A.D. Doyle. So my talk is about humidity control heat treatment, a new pest treatment option in-house at the British Museum. So with our, okay, so with a vast and varied collection, we really like to have different pest mitigation options. As you can see on the screen, so we have low temperature treatment, which has an average time of a week. We have several freezers in-house. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have low oxygen treatment available. In the past, we've had anoxia with nitrogen from a generator and hypoxia using carbon dioxide from cylinders, but at the moment, we don't have them available. We're working on getting those options back. Then we have our new option, humidity control heat treatment, which, as Nico mentioned, is much quicker than the other options. So this is can be really beneficial when we have a tight deadline or we need a quick turnaround in treatment. We also sometimes use the pest monitoring method of isolation of quarantine. It's not a pest treatment, so it's not our preference, but it can be a useful tool for some types of objects and in some situations. So humidity control heat treatment is not new. As Nico mentioned, there's been companies that have been doing it and doing research for years before, and they do it commercially, like ICM. So at the British Museum, we have a thermal chamber, which can be used both as a freezer, basically to do cold treatment, or to do moisture control heat treatment. There's different programs. And for the heat treatment, we had a look at the literature. We know that exposure at 55 degrees Celsius for at least 90 minutes will eradicate all stages of the insect life cycle from museum pests. And the key thing here that makes it suitable for a lot of items is that relative humidity can be controlled to a set range. So far we have set the cycle at 50% RH, but can be adjusted if necessary. So our chamber, how it works is that we measure the temperature in the whole chamber, but we also have a comparator probe, which is inside a wooden block. And when the comparator probe gets to the target temperature, to 55 degrees Celsius, that's when it starts the holding phase, and then it comes back to room temperature. This helps us, I'll show you better in a graph. So you can see here, there's the start of the cycle, temperature starts going up, humidity stabilizes, and then it reaches the target temperature and it holds for at least 90 minutes. In this case, it held for 270 minutes, so 4.5 hours. After that, it goes back to room temperature and it finishes. As you can see throughout, the humidity is good. We can retrieve the objects. So what is suitable to be treated with this? Again, Nico has mentioned a lot of these materials. So most materials that are suitable to be frozen can be heat treated, but fortunately also materials that we wouldn't normally freeze have been successfully treated with this, such as paintings, materials that have a lamellar structure like ivory or mother of pearl that we wouldn't want to freeze, a variety of inlay, and this is without excessive adhesive or waxes or kind of resinous bits. Contemporary pieces, we've just recently treated a new acquisition that was a contemporary piece successfully, and waterlogged wood. I just want to run through this example of a waterlogged piece that we actually treated before we had our thermal cycle running, and we did it with ICM UK. So this was a new acquisition, commissioned sculpture for our Japanese gallery, and it was carved out of a piece of wood that was waterlogged. We normally, for normal wood, we would freeze it without any concerns, but because it was waterlogged wood, we were a bit worried about the moisture content in the piece. So we spoke to ICM and they actually ran a cycle with a slightly higher RH because that's what the object was used to, and that was treated successfully. So that's one of the things that pushed us to try with our own thermal chamber in-house. So before starting to use the chamber with museum objects, we wanted to do a few tests with our handling collection objects. We selected a variety of objects with different materials. We condition checked them before, we took images, and then we condition checked them after, checked against the images to see there weren't any changes. And once we were happy, we proceeded with museum objects. So we did 2 pilot cycles with oversized objects. One group, there were these sculptures, wooden sculptures. The wood had been hollowed out by termite. This is before they were acquired by the museum, but this meant that the wood was, well, it had a lot of cracks. It had, structurally, it needed very stable RH. So we treated them successfully. We also treated a group of objects that were composite. So they have bits of clay with metal armature and quite a lot of materials together, and they were also treated successfully. So we proceeded with another group of materials. We have a collection move project, and we had identified several materials that we didn't want to freeze, things like worked bone, ivory, worked shell. We placed them in a group as ideally for low oxygen treatment, but because we don't have that option at the moment, we realized, oh, but they're actually suitable for heat treatment. So we worked in collaboration with colleagues in the museum to kind of improve the efficiency of the amount of the treatment and create this bespoke kind of drawer unit that was like a movable drawer unit in wheels, and then we could slot the drawers with the objects, and this made us be really space efficient. We actually were able to treat over 300 objects in this cycle. I'll just show you a video of the team kind of moving the objects onto these drawers and then kind of slotting them into the chamber. And well, this has been successful. Now humidity control, heat treatment is another option in-house at the British Museum that we have as an option. And because it's so quick, it also gives us that extra flexibility when we have a tight deadline. So just before I finish, I want to acknowledge my colleagues at the British Museum who helped us in a variety of ways. Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening today. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Fabiana. That was wonderful. Again, went perfectly with Nico's. I always love hearing multiple stories of, especially again, new to me, especially, but new to many other people, treatment methodologies. So glad that you have that at your disposal now. That's awesome. And I'm not sure if you can see the chat, but I can read some of the questions. We have one from Eric about utilizing any microscopy and analytical techniques to determine whether change is occurring to either surrogate pieces or the art or the
So
actual
we
art?
did the tests with the handling collection. We did just use microscopy. We didn't do any analytical techniques. And we didn't notice any change.
And another one from Nico, if you have any live probes in the treatment cycles?
No, but we do have a colony of anthrinas in the museum, so we could put them in. Is that what you mean? Like live, oh, you mean live probes for the temperature RH? Yes, we do have. Yes, we have two. We have one for temperature and RH and one for like another one for temperature, so we can check them. And yeah, they're
Okay, and then in the chat, for those who can't see the chat, because I realize we're Facebook living too, so I guess it is beneficial to read them. Have you or Nicholas run a collection on what is off-gassed into the chamber during heat treatment?
yes, we haven't assessed that either. It'd be really interesting, and yeah, it'd be good to know if any of our objects with suspected contamination, linked to what Nico has been doing, if it's helping.
Yeah, Fabiana, thanks so much for the talk, and it's good to know that you're working with that method too. And I wrote in the chat that it's of course fantastic for a museum, and all of them should have all three options: anoxia for the objects which can't be treated with heat or freezing and warm air. It's so great to have just various options, and which is tailored to the situation, whether you have time or not, what the objects are composed of, etc. So I hope you get back anoxia soon, so you can pick from three options. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we hope so too. It's nice to have all available. Thanks.
Yeah, and how many temperature sensors do you have in that? Did you have in that treatment with all the doors on top of each other? Was it one like central? Two, one on top and bottom?
We actually have three. We have the two probes that are live and the one from the chamber.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks.
And we have another question from Eric. On that same note, how many air exchanges happen during a 24-hour treatment?
I'm not sure, actually. I can research and get back to you, Eric.
Just make sure we haven't missed any. Good. Okay. And it was requested if Nico, if you could answer the same question about the air exchange, how many in 24-hour treatment? Oh, you're muted right now, Nico. I don't think, Nico, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I think in the new type of chambers we have, I think it's 5,000 cubic meters per hour, which is quite substantial, and all that goes through filters. As I said, that's quite important.
And in a similar strain, is it a constant blowing of air into the chamber, or does it pulse on and off as kind of to maintain the heat?
Our one, it's a constant heat. As soon as you start the cycle, it constantly kind of blows the, and then as soon as the cycle finishes, it kind of just vents it and stops.
Great. Well, that's fantastic. So we are coming up. This is truly the end of our first session. We'll have our second session beginning in a little while, but we also have our a slide that's popping up right here that I don't know. Rachel, would you like to introduce it? Or I know it's a new publication. I know.
Thanks, Matt. I think we would like to make sure that people know that the publication from the most recent Pest Odyssey 2021 conference is now available for purchase. Several of the speakers referenced the conference and the publication in their talks. And if you're interested in finding out more, it's available from Archetype. And the link is here, but you should be able to find it on the interweb. And I encourage you to take a look. The website also lists the full table of contents, so you can see the wide range of really interesting talks that were given there. Thank you so much to all of our speakers in this first session, especially those from overseas who stayed, late at work, or we're presenting after hours. We're going to give everybody a little bit of a break to stretch legs, and then we'll come back in about 15 minutes. We'll do a short introduction, maybe a little review of our Airtable, and hopefully we'll get our fundraising link active again and get started with a number of additional great talks. We do have one update that Ana Nacimiento's Benfica presentation unfortunately will not be given today. We hope that she'll be able to present it at another time. But Matt has stepped up and has a great substitution for us. I hope you'll join us back again at 2 o'clock. Hey, Joel.
Hello.
I'm going to give people a few more minutes to come on back. And Leon's working on getting our Give Butter campaign reactivated. And is there anyone who is on the meeting already who is interested in a little live demo of our Airtable image database? I don't know if that's Lisa Goldberg giving a thumbs up to the idea. If anybody else wants to give a thumbs up or a hand raise or a message in the chat. Okay. Got Mary, Denise, Joe, great. So as we give people a few more minutes to get their afternoon caffeine or a snack, let me share my screen. Hopefully, is everyone seeing the Museum Pests identification page?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, thanks, Joel. So for those of you who may not have heard at the top of our session, Museum Pests has a new clean look. The template update allows us to add in some new features and keep our site secure, which is an ongoing battle against the forces of darkness and chaos out there in the ether. On our identification page, so you'll see as you surf around the site, some pages have already been updated and others that's happening this week and will be ongoing. But we have two ways in which we have implemented a change using Airtable. So the first of those is our image library. And if you go to the page, you'll see it opens up this wireframe window. And so you can manipulate the information here within the window on our site, or you can also click on the bottom right corner, this view larger version. If you do that, it takes sort of expands the window. And what you're seeing here is the English image gallery. Again, this is very much a work in progress. Everybody in our identification group was updating info over the last couple of days. And so you'll see, this one lone image here is at the top because it's sorted at the moment alphabetically by US common name. But one of the things that's really great about this new feature is that it allows you to interact with the data and sort on the fields in a way that is most useful to you. So in this case, right now, we only have the English names activated, but over the meeting, we have updated, and we also have French translations as well as Spanish translations for most of the names in our database. But if you wanted to, you could switch the sort to a scientific name. Here again, some of these are images of other kinds of things like damage or this fire ant mound, so they're coming up. But you'll see now that our data is sorted by scientific name rather than common name. So when we get into the debate, the entomologists and scientists in our group and the rest of us who are, less familiar with the scientific names, then you have the ability to sort by either one. The other fields that you may want to sort on is if you know that you have larvae or adults. In this case, we've got our damage coming up first, but here, just by switching from first to last, we can look at anything that has a nymph stage or a larval stage. And that allows you to sort of narrow down the images that you may be seeing. We'll be activating some other sort fields, but that is one way. The other thing that you can do is we're going to undo our sort here and go back to our common name. You can also filter. So in this case, we may want to say that we know that it's a moth. We just are not sure what kind of moth it is. So we're just going to put in contains, but you have a number of other qualifiers that you can use to narrow down your data. So in this case, searching on moth is going to bring up a number of images of moths, as well as moth residue and moth damage, and narrow down your ability to look for something that match what you are seeing on your traps. In this case, so the image gallery is primarily focused in on having an image that allows you to sort of visually identify what you're looking for. But if we go back to our identification landing page and we go to our pest fact sheets, as we referenced earlier at the introduction, our old pest fact sheets were PDFs that you downloaded here. And while we haven't taken them offline quite yet, and it's not as the new template is not highlighting the links, but if you click here, it is live to take you to the Airtable with the live fact sheets, also available through Airtable. And just like I did before, I'm going to click on view a larger version. And so you'll see this is sort of a similar format, but we've highlighted a number of the other fields. So once again, right now we are sorted by, in this case, we're sorted by our scientific name. But if you wanted to, you could go in to sort by common name. And it may be that we were sorted by common name. So let's, so now we've sorted by our scientific name. So whichever is the method that is most useful to you. Here in this module, as you hover over the cover image, you'll see other images associated with that pest. All the images that you're seeing here have been reviewed by the entomologists who are participants in the working group. And so they should be accurate. So in addition here to, sorting, and we have a number of other fields. And if you scroll over down this list and the filter, you can sort of begin to see that. So some ways of narrowing things down are things like taxonomy. So in this case, that pulls up a list of things that might help you narrow things down. So if we wanted to look for just things that were spiders, we could turn that one on, or anything that's tagged as a vertebrate is going to bring up a number of the rodent and bird species that are sometimes associated as pests. You can narrow that down further by just going for rodents. If you're interested in trying to figure out what pests are most problematic for certain kinds of collections, you could turn on the risk rating for, let's say, some of the organics and be able to sort that way. During the meeting, we started tagging things for the pests that appear on the Insects Limited poster and the new Heritage Trust or English Heritage poster. So you'll be able to find those as well. The fact sheets contain more expanded information, a sort of little bit of general about the life stages, and more information on control and treatment. And if you click on any one of these entries, it brings it up in a larger format. We are working eventually towards having the ability to have PDF downloads, but this format is now mobile friendly. And so as several people have also referenced, I think 80 talked about being on the move and in the galleries, you have the ability to access this on a phone or tablet, which may be more useful to people these days than a printed sheet. So this resource is still has all the information from our old fact sheets, plus a lot more. And if there are additional fields or tags for sorting, we'd love to hear that feedback from you. So I am going to stop my share now and turn us over to Genevieve. And Genevieve, can you introduce yourself and then take us away for our afternoon session?
Hi, sure. Matt and I weren't sure who was going to do that, so I was his backup. My name is Genevieve Tachi. I'm a member of the Museum Pests Working Group, or I'm a participant in the Museum Pests Working Group. And I work at the Harvard University Herbaria. I apparently need more coffee. Welcome to the afternoon session of our presentations. We're going to start you off with Matthew Micklitz from the Winter Term Museum, who you've all seen this morning. And he's going to talk about coffee and cigarette beetles, IPM, and preventative conservation at Winter Term Museum in conversation with others.
Cool. Thanks, Genevieve. And surprise, you got tagged. Sorry. Oh, but thank you so much. All right, I'll get my screen shared here. Oops. There we go. Okay, so I think my presentation will pale in comparison to the presentation that was supposed to happen right now, so bear with me. But essentially, this is something that I had thrown together during the pandemic. I looked at the timestamp when I actually did first draft this, and it was in March of 2020. Actually March, April 2020, and I had been in correspondence with several friends and other organizations that, we were all kind of scrambling for ways to communicate and ways to keep busy in some cases and just learn in a very tense time. So So I'd come up with something that I have a much longer presentation to preventive conservation at Winterthur. And this is much more concise than that. And so I'll be talking about both the format I use, like what I have here, and also touching on preventive and IPM at Winterthur. So coffee and cigarette beetles, if you're of a certain age, you know where the title kind of comes from. It kind of did twofold. It encompassed the idea of a casual approach to talking about things, literally having a cup of coffee in your hand, and laid back nature of having a true kind of collegial way of speaking about things, not in a setting of a conference. So at any rate, I'll click here. I always like talking about when we how to manage the pest management itself, that, we have IPM, but how do you get to the point where you can put it into effect and keep it going? At Winterthur Museum, we're lucky enough to have 4 preventive techs. They're under my supervision, and we enter any findings. We check our traps monthly and put our findings into Excel sheet, report unusual activities, and then troubleshoot for the solutions. I'm so very fortunate. Something I came up the other day via Adam Osgood and his group was expectation management, which is the idea of thinking about things from these different perspectives, that you may always want to try to shoot high, but not everyone can. Not everyone has a fumigation chamber. Not everyone has people to do management. And especially in this time when people are getting laid off, losing their jobs due to the pandemic, that the resource of just having labor, unfortunately and sadly, has been diminished in many institutions. So I feel very fortunate I have the people I do to be able to do this, but it's something that I started thinking about more as I was editing this a bit. And we also are fortunate we have a weekly visit from Pest Service Contractor, and that's something I know Michael will be talking about, and Abby may even have it in her presentation as well, but I know in particular Michael will be talking about it a little later. And we're lucky enough that, again, we drew up a contract that we're able to have sticky traps as part of the contract, and we asked them not to do the collection areas. They do everything but the outbuildings, offices, hallways, underneath our gallery spaces. I do take them around. Sorry about that. Oh no, there we go. I do take them around to the spaces for security purposes, but otherwise, and they do report to me what they find. However, it's a bit of a different ask towards them as opposed to my staff for how we go about tackling the IPM done by them. And it's always nice to have support, though. They're there if we do have major issues on the outside and things that need to be treated that we can treat, and are able to implement that. And also, again, this will be touched on again. I don't want to take any fuel away from future talks, but creating buy-in, collaboration, and cooperation. My staff, I'm not too worried about that, and the pest contractor, a little bit worried about truly understanding where we want to go, and that we can't always take the road that they would like to take. But moreover, just the institution in general, having that buy-in and the collaboration, and ultimately cooperate actually comes down more often to cooperation, that they can listen to advice that we give in order to keep pests at bay. It can be tricky sometimes. And so here's an example too of the Excel sheet that we use. I won't get into it in too detail. It's very simple, straightforward. We have our date that we find a pest. We have a trap number is in column C there. And then we have also, if it was found in the room, we can note where it was found. Of course, the species, then the life stage, the count, and if it's dead or alive. We have it separated out between 2 columns. It was something we formatted with hopes of putting it in EMU. Right now, that's not a high hope due to funds, but it was at the time a way that we could transfer it into EMU easier, that I was told by our EMU experts on staff. So that's why it's formatted that way. We are going to relook at this. You see, this was in last year in March, we had 7,224 entries. We easily have another 1,000 entries, I would say now. And we started this back in 2011. Actually, I see our first a date up there at the top. So at any rate, we are looking at making it a little bit more accessible and utilizing maybe some other means of tracking pests. But this has done us very well, all in all, for being able to track trends and be able to search the document. I have to go in and make sure everything's looking fine every so often. So it is valuable information. And just some examples. So again, this is something I share with colleagues. So I give examples of pests that we've found. And speaking of buy-in, I'm very fortunate to have a very a good friend for one thing, but a friend who can stand pests, I suppose is one way to put it. That the top three, the images that go around the top, that's why I noted the one is Wikipedia, but the other three images were taken in-house, which I think is high value. If you can get images in-house, you don't have to worry about copyright. You can utilize it how you wish in presentations. And we're lucky to have some really high definition images taken of a very angry Anthrenus Verbesci over there on the left. And we have our odd beetle in the middle and black carpet beetle larva. And this goes into buy-in and cooperation as well. So IPM, preventive and museum activities. I always like to highlight this. Here's an example of a food service person who left a pound of butter, or people left a pound of butter on a windowsill. I walked into a space just to do a normal walkthrough. Luckily, this was not in the collection area, but it was right outside of a collection area. You could probably take a couple steps and get to the collection. A mouse found the butter before I did. So we had a conversation with our restaurant associates, who's our food service provider, and still is. This was several years ago, but they still are. And we've since then created liaison between them and us to better communicate our needs and to better communicate where things can be stored, where things can be left, where things can be plugged in, when candles can be used, where candles can't be used, where fire, open flames. Some of it seems pretty obvious to us, but it could be a challenge. It could be an ongoing challenge that we've tackled for many years in many different ways, but we have something in writing now in our preventive manual. And I'll show you another example of buy-in and of how we've kind of tackled challenges. This is an interesting photo. So what you're seeing is a collection table inside one of our rooms in Winterthur Museum. If you've ever been, it's essentially a large mansion. And so what you're seeing is a tilt-top table with flowers and little vases, but all the other white on there are flower petals and stamens and little bits of pollen from peonies. You also see it on the ground below it. This is actually an older photo because we caught this back again years ago. I'm going to say probably it was around 2010. We had this instance happen where we called it the amazing exploding peonies that we found it more than one time, unfortunately, in our collection. So we had a conversation with we have flower rangers, and we wrote up, you see 14.0 denotes where it is in our preventive manual. We came up with general procedures in collaboration with our flower program and their staff. We had training up until a couple years ago. We're going to revive that at some point where we walk through how to properly even water the plants within the collection. So it's a great collaboration, a great success story. That's why I'm glad to say this is an old photo because we haven't seen anything like that since. It is tough to tell people that please don't use a certain flower, especially when it looks beautiful, it smells beautiful, it's seasonal. This is in the spring, typically when the peonies, late spring when the peonies bloom on our property. So it's kind of tough to tell them that, but it was great collaboration. And when you have something like this occur, it's pretty easy to see why we need some change. But again, I like to point out success stories as well when it comes to buy-in and collaboration. And then I also like to point out to them, to my staff and to anyone I'm talking to whenever I deliver examples of, again, successes and when how we institute preventive measures at Winterthur is resources. So we have our MuseumPests, of course, our beloved MuseumPests. I always point people there. And I have to plug this. This is our new, this is our new book. our new publication, Caring for Your Cherished Objects. This came out just about a year, 2 years ago. My hand is the one in the upper right-hand corner vacuuming the rug. That's my claim to fame. And I did partially author the preventive chapter, which I'm proud of, but it is a resource that we use on staff with my staff, amongst many other resources, publications that the world over. So that's one of our newer ones. Okay, and so this comes back full around coffee, and now we have coffee and cigarettes, a iconic image. But the whole point of this is actually, this is kind of what you want, right? You want to eventually be able to realize that you did a good thing, be able to sit back and understand each other, but moreover, the value of a little comedic, a little lightheartedness to when you're delivering information to folks. Whenever you're talking about IPM, it seems to always be a good idea to take a lighthearted approach. Not always, I should back up. Many times to take a lighthearted approach in order to convey what exactly you want to folks to do in your institution, or to how to go about things. And for me, it's been a success at Whitaker Museum with instituting, again, between IPM and preventive. We have great communication, and again, I know we'll have Abby coming up next to talk more about buy-in, which is perfect. So I'll wrap it up with that, just for the sake of time. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Thanks so much, Matt. We only have about a minute, so if someone has a quick question to drop in the chat, that's great. And if not, we will try to answer questions as we go. Same for anything that comes up on our Facebook Live. Now we're going to hear from Abby Griffith at the Yale Center for British Art, who's going to talk to us about creative approaches to integrated pest management, engaging museum staff, and creating buy-in, which I think is something we can all agree is really important.
Okay, can you all hear that? Hear me and see my screen?
Yep, perfect.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about kind of my journey and what I'm working on at the Yale Center for British Art, with some of my challenges that I've come up with as well, or come up against. And it's not working. Sorry. There we go. So I made this poster, and this was a poster presentation I gave at the AIC presentation a couple of years ago. And so that's what my presentation is based on today, but also I'm going to be giving you some updates to some of the other things that I've been doing. So this is just kind of an overview. I do bug jars, which I give out bug jars and I put stickers on the top. We have an intranet page and I use positive language. We play bug bingo, and I recognize staff contributions to the IPM program by knighting them, or kind of ordaining them with the title of Bug King or Bug Queen. So some of the things that I do at the YCBA to create more kind of avenues for conversation is number one, use easy to digest information, visual language, lots of pictures. So you're going to see lots of pictures in my presentation today. Pictures, symbols, examples, and reminders. So I just post things all over our intranet page. I send emails. I make sure I print my reports with pictures of the bugs on, so that people are aware of what these bugs look like and the damage that may have been caused to our building or collection. And then I keep the language when I'm talking just kind of conversationally or about policies light and fun, and try to keep it a little bit more non-formal. Some of the entry points is games and jokes like bug bingo, and I'll show you some of my posts from the internet page where I make some pretty great dad jokes. Staff recognition, creating friendly competition through bug bingo, and requests for feedback and for questions from all staff using a survey. So things that I've seen happen at the YCBA since I've started our program is increased staff engagement and participation in IPM, and increased morale, increased conversation and curiosity about bugs and about bugs in our museum, and insight into departments that I need to engage with more. So those departments that aren't so engaged with our program. So it was back in 2018, I went to training with Rachel and came to my first ever museum pest working group meeting at Harvard. So I did my training there, and then I came back and walked into one of our basement rooms and found these everywhere. They were all over the floor. And I was a little bit confused because I had been told we absolutely have no bugs, no pests. So Abby, you go ahead and you do this, but we don't have a pest problem in our museum. So I walked into, the basement room. These were all over the floor. And when I picked them up and looked closer, I found out that they were the drugstore beetles. I called my boss and he said, are you sure? Are you really sure? Are you just kind of being, on high alert since you just had your training? But he came down and looked at it with me and agreed, yep, actually we do have a big problem. And that was because we had put some, we'd been using an external contractor and they had put mouse poison in some of our rooms, even though we didn't have mice at the time. And they had been sitting there for years. So eventually we had this drugstore beetle infestation. So because everyone thought, oh, we don't have a pest problem, I was like, right, I am blowing this place up. I'm gonna distribute this report with the pictures everywhere. So I put it, I printed it and gave it directly to the head of operations, to the head of conservation, to anyone who worked in this area. And I distributed it also on bulletin boards that we have behind the scenes in our staff areas. And then also on our intranet page, which I started a few weeks later. One of the other things that I did next was to buy these jars and these fun stickers and distribute them to everyone in the museum so that everyone could have a visual reminder on their desk that there are bugs in the museum. But I kind of kept it fun and light by using non-threatening bugs that everyone kind of sees and that are relatively cute. One of our operations staff did come to me and he was like, oh, great, thanks for this jar. I put my candy in it. And I was like, well, that's not really the point. The point is that you find a bug and put it in there. But I didn't push him too hard on that because it's still IPM. So these are my bug jars with the stickers, and it has resulted in increased positive conversation about IPM because people have been walking around with their jars. They have it on their desk, so it's a constant reminder. And actually, I did have in the summertime, we always have the increased pest incidences. And there was one day in the summer that I got 3 bug jars placed on my desk with a little note saying who it was from. And that kind of goes into my next slide, which is the bug bingo. So not only did I give people the jars to catch bugs, but I wanted to make sure that everyone could be more engaged and also have an understanding of what was happening in the museum. So I created bug bingo, which tells everyone kind of recent things that have happened or come up, recent insects that we found, or rodents. We did have a mouse come in. So I put anything that's kind of relevant on the bug bingo board, and the first person to bring me 5 notifications about something on the board wins Bug King or Bug Queen of the month. And I, again, post that everywhere. So I use that content to remind everyone that we have an IPM program, that it's fun and engaging. It's fun to participate. It's also created some really great friendly competition. So increased conversations are being had around the museum across departments about bugs and what people are finding. So it's just a more natural conversation now. So these are These are my first ever bug kings and my first bug queen, and they are all on security and custodial staff. And I was, that I used this as a point to say to our curators and other departments, hey, you've got to step up your game. We have custodial and security beating you all in bug bingo. And one of our curators, who's unfortunately not at the museum anymore, Matthew, he went crawling around on his hands and knees looking for bugs, and he was determined, and he finally got Bug King of the Month. So these are just my kind of files that I add on Photoshop to the pictures. And then I decided to make them into real pins so that I give them a pin and they can wear it if they would like to wear it for the month. The next step is to make a gender neutral or non-binary bug royalty. So I'm thinking about Bug Majesty or Bug Sovereign. If anyone has a favorite of one of those or another suggestion, I'm definitely welcome. I would love to hear them. So this is where I kind of post. This is one of the things that I've posted. So on our intranet page, but I also print this out, put it on the bulletin board, and make sure everyone knows that at this point, John was Bug King of the Month, and this is what he did. So he actually went through some security footage for me, and he'd done a couple of other things, but the biggest thing was that he solved a mystery of why my traps were being moved and who was moving them, which turned out to be cockroaches, really massive cockroaches in our basement room, were moving my traps around and not getting trapped. This is the same one for Jen. She was our first female bug queen. And this is a list of everything that she did. So it's a staff recognition. It also kind of tells people a quick, brief update of what's been happening, what's been found in the building. And then the intranet page is just a place where I post literally everything. So this has all of our policies. If you found a bug, what to do. If you found a rodent, what to do, who do you call, what happens, what are the next steps. I also provide all of our policies with an easy to read format with pictures so that they don't really need to read things. It's just like a very visual overview of, okay, well, we've had mice. Oh, there's a silver box. At least then people who don't want to read the policies or who aren't so engaged get to see kind of, oh, that silver box that I saw in the break room is actually for mice, so I should keep away from it, or I'll check and be curious and see if there's a mouse in there. So I use a lot of visual language. I also provide examples of what damage can look like in a collection so that people know what to look for, and examples of why we have policies, and this one was a really big one. I am actually not a manager status, so I'm a clerical and technical staff, which means I can't really tell anyone what to do. And that is why I'm going to all of these lengths to create buy-in and have other people help me with my job, because it is just me in the museum. And I I kind of do write the policies, but I don't have the final say on anything. So providing examples of why we have policies was really important. And it's a way of not telling anyone what to do, but showing examples of what happens when the policies aren't followed. So we had some flowers delivered to our 4th floor offices, which is usually where the executive director and our higher curator offices are up there on the 4th floor. And they'd had some flowers delivered, and then they had an outbreak of these true bugs, and they were all the way different life stages, nymphs through adults. So it was great to say, oh, you know what? That's because you had plants brought into the museum, and that's a policy that we have a no plant policy. So that's your fault, but saying it in a nice way. I also tried to give some jokes. So your friendly neighborhood spiders man. I've had a lot of people approach me saying that they are terrified of spiders and that they're not going to catch them in the bug jar if they do find them. So I made a little bit more of like an info session, put it up on my internet page just so people know what they're doing and how they're helping me in my IPM efforts, and that they shouldn't really be afraid, and they're not likely to see them during the day. But it has provided some reassurance to staff members who have approached me and said, I'm terrified of spiders. I don't want to talk about them. I don't want to see them. What do I do if I see them? Staff recognition is a place where I post, again, Bug King or Bug Queen of the month and what they do. Pete, for example, made this trap because he was in an area of the museum where he didn't have his bug jar. So he put 2 plastic cups together and caught this flying ant. So I just try to keep it fun and light. And then the next thing I've done recently is start the IPM art gallery, which was a square on my bug bingo board, so that if people did see a bug, they could draw it as well, which also got them thinking more about what bugs look like, so that they can learn a little bit more about identification. So this is one that Tom Hendricks and Fran from our security team, they did it together, and they had a lot of fun doing it, and they both won a square on their bug bingo board. And then Kyle, who's one of our, actually he's an artist, he's a really great artist. He made this one as well. And this was a great post because I could say, you know, he's only 1 square away, and his challenges, who at the time were Tom, Frenchie, Mel, and Shawnee, like, step up your game, bring me more bugs, figure out what else is going on in the building. And then I made a staff survey. So this was just to get some feedback from those who were engaged and participating in IPM, and to see those who weren't, like, have you checked this out? Do you have your bug jar? Do you play bug bingo? Do you know about our policies? So this is just one section. I didn't want to, bore you with the whole survey. But I did a section about each of the bug bingo, bug jars, bug king and queen, and then some other questions, which gave me some really great feedback, that mostly positive, which was great to see that I've had such a, the program's having such a positive impact on the museum, especially in morale, which was really nice to see that people are enjoying learning about how to protect their collections. But also gave me really great other suggestions. So somebody said, so the zebra page is our intranet page. So I just looked for the first time and I'll return. So that's good for me to know that engaging people with surveys and asking questions more directly also means that people will check out what I'm doing if they haven't checked the intranet page for a while. And it provided a forum for people to give me suggestions so that they feel like they have a sense of ownership and kind of responsibility and role in the program. And these are all the people, just a reminder to me, really, that it's not me alone doing this in the museum. We're all responsible.
Thank you, Abby. That was wonderful. I think we've got to jump right over to Michael, but if you see in the chat, everyone loves your ideas, and there were a couple questions that maybe we can try to answer later. So thank you so much for that. That was wonderful. Next up, we have Michael Milliken from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and he's going to talk to us about selecting the Met's integrated pest management vendor.
Hello, I just need to share my screen. Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about selecting the Metropolitan Museum of Art's new pest management vendor. But first of all, I'm Michael Milliken. I'm the IPM program administrator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Part of the mandate when I came on 2 years and 11 months ago was to put together an RFP for a new vendor and to unify our pest management under one vendor. We had 2 vendors at that moment. We had our traditional vendor that we'd had for about 10 years, pest management vendor. And then we had brought on another vendor who, on kind of an emergency basis to deal with a rodent problem in our food service venues that caused our food service venues to be shut down. So we had to respond to that very quickly. But having two vendors provide pest control in a museum our size introduced its own problems into the best way to provide pest management at the museum. Only certain people could go in restaurants and treat, only certain people could go in general areas and treat. So part of that was to bring it all unified underneath one roof. I was expecting to do this about 2.5 years ago to get into this, but the last 2 years have been a challenge to get everybody together and get this done. But thankfully, over the last year, we were able to go through the whole process. And we created an IPM RFP for the museum, worked with our procurement group to push this forward, release it out into the world, where we invited about 20 different pest management vendors to apply. And we were able to do it to put together a nice process to get that vendor. I'm going to talk a little bit about that process today. As you can see, it was kind of a developed plan, very specific to IPM. And that's some of the things, that I'm going to talk about. But like Abby was saying, sometimes pest management can be a burden on pest infestations in your museum, because sometimes the practices they use promote pest activity instead of mitigating it. So as you can see here, like Abby was talking about, bait, sometimes rodent bait, when it's left out too long, can become a great source of food for moth larvae or odd beetle larvae, or all kinds of other larvae that love to eat the cretinaceous and proteaceous material in those baits. And those baits are your general run-of-the-mill rodenticides, anticoagulants, things like contract, things like that. If they're left out for too long and not maintained on a regular basis, they will become a great source for pantry pests. Another thing that becomes a great source for pests is rodents that are killed by bait that then die in areas where they're inaccessible. So as you can see, this little rodent here at the bottom right ate some bait at some point, and then moth larva licked his bones clean. So sometimes your pest control efforts can have a deleterious effect, basically, on pest activity. So having a really clear, defined scope of work for your pest management vendor is really important. So that's something we put together, working with the IPM working group here at the museum. We put together a very IPM specific plan that kind of mitigates the pesticides you're not allowed to use, especially rodenticides. We're not allowed to use rodenticides in the museum, or even almost at this point, we're not really allowed to use them outside the museum anymore, or we choose not to based on our scope of work, because we find that rodenticides, having mice die in the walls is not a really good thing for moths and other insects. It's not great for health and sanitation. And on the exterior, it's a danger for secondary bird poisonings, etc. But we also like to control what sort of pesticides we use for the insects on the inside of the museum, just to keep humans healthy and safe, to make sure that we're targeting our pesticide applications in the most reasonable manner, in the most effective manner, and not just kind of applying pesticides for the sake of applying pesticides, which sometimes when you go and get vendors, especially in New York City, one thing they're going to do is they're just going to apply pesticides on a regular schedule. We didn't want that to be the case. We wanted to make sure you have evidence in hand that you need to apply to pesticide. You have to have authorization from myself or our buildings manager to actually apply pesticides. And we want to know where they're being applied all the time. We want to make sure that we know the chemical footprint of our building, really. And so that was all built into our scope of work, but it also detailed the data that they needed to collect related to pest activity. One of the things that we've been doing at the museum is that we have our department heads go around and they do all their monitoring data. I know many of you are familiar with this. They collect the monitoring data, they check the traps, they place the traps, they map the traps. It's pretty big activity load for some of our collections managers and technicians who have a lot of other work they need to be doing. And it can be a time suck. So one of the things we wanted to do was add our pest management professional as a resource to those collections managers and technicians to help them cut into some of the time. So the PMP will do a lot of that data collection related to galleries and storage areas, and allow some electronic tools to take care of the reporting instead of having our collections manager to fill out spreadsheets. So including that into our scope of work was really important. We also wanted to make sure that they were reporting conditions conducive to pests whenever they see leaks, cracks, crevices, things that need to be fixed, things that are providing source for pest activity, dust, wool carpet, things like this are being reported in their service reports. And we really define those very clearly in the scope of work about what they need to be collecting as they're doing inspections, what they need to be collecting for monitoring, what they need to be collecting about their pesticide applications, et cetera, et cetera. So we included those reporting requirements in the scope of work. We were also interested in kind of some innovations. There are what's going on new in the pest management industry that allow us to work more effectively, especially related to rodent monitoring. There's lots of really cool little tools out in the pest management industry that have come online recently. Network devices, network traps, things that give you notifications on your smartphone when there's pest activity in an area or if there's a trap. So we wanted to hear about what the firms were doing, how they were providing those services, and if there are any sort of value-added services they could bring related to sanitation or rodent control to allow us to work more effectively, kind of spending the same amount of time doing what we've been doing, but to do it better and do it more effectively. So we were looking for that from our firms when we went through this RFP process. And obviously we want it to be cost effective, because one of the things when we went into that situation where we had to have an emergency vendor, we kind of just asked them what the scope of work is. Tell us what we need to do and how much we need to pay you, and we'll do it because we're in an emergency situation. So now stepping back away, now that we're not in an emergency anymore, and now that we kind of going to unify these two vendors under one, how can we make this more cost effective, and how can we get the most bang for our buck, which is obviously important for the museum. It's important for all museums and businesses in general. So it's something that we're hoping to cut our costs as well, even if we're getting a better vendor than we thought we were getting before. There's another point I wanted to make about that, but so one of the things actually that the pandemic allowed us to do, especially the lockdown, is it allowed us to understand the level of service we needed. We found out that we probably had too much service at one point because we were in that emergency situation, and it allowed us to kind of really drill down and how can we make our services most effective and cost effective and time effective, because we don't have all the time in the world to walk around all our galleries and all our storage areas and all our office spaces. Can't get eyes on it, every day or even every week. So we really need to figure out how can we be most effective doing that. So the IPM working group here at the museum, which is a group of buildings professionals, collections care people, conservators, scientists, and engineers, got together and put together the scope of work. I drafted it because I come from the pest management industry, where I used to work in a private company. So I would be on the responding side of these RFPs. So I was used to responding to them, but I kind of knew how they went together. So I drafted it, but then I got all the input from the buildings people and from our collections care and conservation staff of how the RFP and how our pest management vendor could be most useful for them. And getting that feedback was essential for kind of deciding how the pest management firm can fit into our organization and how they can best service all the needs of our stakeholders. So it was really, I think that was an important part of it, to get everybody together and kind of talk through our issues with pest management. I had an idea of how it could go, but then also everyone else kind of opened my eyes in different ways and how they could be more effective. And so we built that into the scope of work. And then they were part of the vendor selection process the whole way going through, because I needed them. I needed a group of people to help me decide who was the best vendor for us. So we brought everybody in. We did a big tour of the museum, pointing out all our pest issues. Like I said, we invited about 20 people to that. That scared off a good amount of people just by walking them around the museum. I think we got down to about 11 in the end. We had 11 people who actually sent in a proposal. Some of those were kind of considered non-responsives. 2 of those were like non-responsive just because they didn't kind of meet what we asked for them to put into the RFP. They didn't provide all the information about their services, et cetera, et cetera. So that was, got to do a site visit when you have people coming to obviously bid on pest control, because they'll get a better idea about what's going on and actually see the space and what they need to do. We definitely had to partner with our procurement department on this, because obviously the procurement people don't know a lot about pest management. In the past, when pest management has been done, it's been kind of, okay, go find the vendor will tell us what they need to do, and we'll just pay for that. Whatever they say we have to do, they're going to do that. So we really had to kind of talk them through and say, no, we have this scope of work is very specific. This is how we want them to do it. We had to kind of educate them about IPM and let them know, like, what are the things we're looking for? What are the things we think are good? And convince them that even if the cost, the price point is a little higher than we want it, and you guys think it should be, you have to let our determination, some of our evaluation, the IPM working group evaluation, actually pick the best vendor. And they're really responsive to that, and they understood that was kind of a really good way to go forward. And we understood as well that there are cost considerations when you go through a process like this. You can't just pick the most expensive if they're the best. But thankfully, the best turned out not to be the most expensive in this case. And they weren't even close to the most expensive, which is really great. So we did our proposal evaluation. We let procurement do their algorithm that let them decide what the best pricing was. And then we got together and we ranked our firms on what we thought. And it was a collaborative process, talking about what we thought we needed, what we pulled out of each proposal that we thought was the best. And then we got down to 3 from our initial 8 that we had that were actually responsive. We did vendor interviews, and we were right. They were all really great, but there was one definitely that stood out for us that we thought was the best. It wasn't the one that procurement thought was the best. But the way that we scored them together, it turned out that the choice we wanted was the one that was chosen. And they brought a lot of really great things to the table. They did. They're actually a local NYC vendor who's been here, family owned, for 50 years. They've been doing pest management here in the museum for 50 years, not in the museum, in New York City, but they have experience in other museums. They worked in the Guggenheim, they worked in the Morgan Library, they've worked in large scale institutions, parks, other things that kind of are related to where we work at the museum, because we're right on the park. They have familiarity with parks as well. So it was really a quality firm, but they also have a relationship with the international group that's based in Sweden, who provides some of those innovations that we were talking about, smart technology related to rodent trapping, related to rodent monitoring using infrared cameras. Some very cool new technology out there that allows you to get alerts on your smartphones related to rodent activity. And they brought a fresh set of eyes into the museum that really allowed us to see the museum in a new light. I mean, I'd only been here 2.5 years, and I saw it in a new light, that I brought in some new things, and then having them even come in and think about it as well. We've just found some really great synergy to deal with some of the issues and prevent some of the things in the building that were providing mice access, rodents access, and allowing some insects to thrive as well. So yeah, it was a good process. I'm hoping to actually be able to share with the Museum Pests website and working group a copy of our RFP, so you can use that going forward as a kind of a template for how you want to put together. Obviously, the Met has unique challenges and has a very large staff, but I think what we put together in this RFP, it can be super useful for any museum, anyone who's interested in working in IPM in museums, anybody who's working with a vendor or a contractor in museums. I think this will give you some good information to work with, a nice template to work with to move forward, to think about that procurement process. Think about, is my vendor working out, or what can I do to make my vendor work better for me? And I think it was a good process. We got through it right before everything shut down again. We started it in May. We thought we were going to be done in 2 months. It took us until the end of October. And then Omicron hit. So it's been a learning process for the new vendor, but I think because we went through the process of selecting the RFP and putting that scope of work together, we have a better vendor, and we're actually saving a lot of money as well. So I highly recommend doing that. And like I said, I'll get this out, and hopefully Rachel can share it, the Museum Pest people can share with interested people. So that's it for me for now. Hopefully I'm on time, and yeah, right on time. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was wonderful. If people have questions and you leave them in the chat, we'll try to find time for that at the end as we go along. Next up, we have Adam Osgood from Historic New England, who's working with Pat Kelly and James Feston of Insects Limited to update us on the new nitrogen bubble at Historic New England. Adam.
Let's see. Okay, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, we got you.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, hi everybody. Yep, my name's Adam Osgood. I'm a collections technician and IPM coordinator for Historic New England. And that just means I wear a whole lot of hats. And this presentation is about our new nitrogen treatment facility. Last year at this time, I did a presentation as we were beginning the process, and now we are fully underway. And so this will serve as a quick review and update on where we're at and how we got there. All right. So first, quickly about Historic New England. Many people don't know about us. We are the oldest historic preservation organization in the United States. Our house museums are in a wide range in the New England region. We have 38 properties, and 30 of them are furnished with museum collections with a very wide range of materials. A full 40% of our object collection is on view or in storage in our house museums. And because of this, we face significant pest challenges. And many of our houses have very minimal, if any, climate control. So clothes moths, yes, this is all in-house images here. Carpet beetles and anobium furniture beetles, wood-boring pests. We have a decades-long history of IPM implementing many strategies. And for nearly 30 years, we've used a CO2-based system, which is a 1,000 cubic foot chamber. And in 2019, we started seeing signs of wear and inefficiencies in that system. And we started thinking about replacing it and upgrading it. We got some funding from an anonymous client. We provide services to outside institutions a lot, and more recently. So discussions with a great colleague, Pat Kelly of Insects Limited, and Bill Smith of Heritage Packaging. After talking with them, they seemed that maybe nitrogen would be the way to go. This could be done. For a long time, we just weren't sure if we could do it on the scale, nearly 1,000 cubic feet with a resealable, reusable door. Could this be done? And Bill and Pat both said yes, and they agreed to join on as partners in this project. Some of the early objectives in the project were to recreate a chamber of the same size and try to create a system tight enough for a continuous or possibly non-continuous flow system. So in other words, are we running the nitrogen all the time, or can we stop it at a certain point and hold the concentration where it needs to be? Can it be tight enough for that? And then bring in the use of a nitrogen generator so that we can then have a kind of unlimited source of nitrogen, because it's going to take a lot, right, to get this going. So first, our physical expansion, we doubled our size. Down on the far right, you can see our CO2 chamber. We kept running treatments. We have a very high demand through the pandemic period. So we kept running CO2 treatments while we were expanding and upgrading into nitrogen. And that also included a committed quarantine space so that we could hold objects as they're waiting for treatment. And here's a quick floor plan on the far right. You can see this is where the old bubble is. And then as you move towards the left, the different aspects of it, the compressor and the generator tank, the MB meaning Mama Bubble. We named her Mama Bubble, and Baby Bubble. We had a small one as well. And then the quarantine space. And then here are the critical components. On the right here, this is the compressor made by Kaiser. And this arrived about this time last year. The compressor's a rotary screw air compressor made by Kaiser. The nitrogen generator on the left with buffer tank in the middle is a Parker pressure swing adsorption generator that can reach 99.99 nitrogen purity. And here it is fully installed with the plumbing and electrical. Over the next couple of months, and this is where we get updated now from last year, an important aspect of the space upgrade was to improve our supplemental heat system to ensure we can maintain higher temps in the space, which is necessary to maximize efficacy of treatment. So getting up above 80 degrees, 85 degrees, holding at that high temperature to improve our efficacy. And also there was some humidification systems there as well. The membrane material of the chamber is Vapor Block Plus 20. It's a 7-layer co-extruded barrier made from state-of-the-art polyethylene and EVOH resins. It's more than 100 times less permeable than typical high-performance polyethylene. And here's an image of this is the material. This is the 3-track zipper system and the aluminum framework. This was all put together by, again, Bill Smith of Heritage Packaging. And here he is in his facility piecing the membrane together with that material, the zipper lock, and the framework. And then on May 11th of last year, installation began. You can see the tanks of the CO2 still cranking away in the foreground here on the left. The chamber went up nicely, and it looks pretty neat with a nice golden interior. They also provided this baby bubble, which is a nice feature. It doesn't have a committed framework, so it can actually collapse. We can vacuum out all the air and just treat the volume of the material inside. So for short batches, it can be much quicker, and it's an efficient, nice addition. By the second day on May 12th, Pat and his colleague, Pat Kelly and James Feston, his colleague from Insects Limited, came to install the introduction system. So that's where it comes from, the generator, and it comes comes through this humidification system, and then so that we're not so that nitrogen being very dry, we're ensuring that we're not shocking materials inside with a quick drop in relative humidity. One of the really cool features of this, on the left, you can see that we actually have a solenoid that's connected, that has an internet switch, so that the generator, the flow can be turned on and off from anywhere. I'm often at various different sites doing work, and so I can turn on and off that gas as needed from anywhere, which is really neat, from my phone. And then the monitoring system was also installed by Pat and James. Here you see the sensors that are hanging up in the top corner, and then that feeds through, and all of that data goes into the cloud and is digested by the software. The vendor that provided this went by the name of Rotronic. And then that same day, we loaded the system with non-collection materials. These are just boxes of institutional archives that we happen to have in the building, just to kind of fill it up and run a test treatment. We had a little bit of a hiccup in that the sensor at first, the vendor was unable, he sent us the wrong one. And so we ran a test, our first test, with using a simple anoxy bug, sort of red light, green light that often people use with oxygen scavenger systems. We put that in the window. We used bioassays that Pat provided so that we could confirm mortality, and that worked very well. Once that treatment was complete, we did a couple of test runs, and then and also we did an emergence. We had a client, important client, again, remaining anonymous, wanted to kind of skip the line in our CO2 because we had a big backup. And we said, well, we can't do that to our other clients. And so we offered them if they'd like to be our first test run in the nitrogen chamber. And they agreed to that. And we did our first one that was quite successful. Again, we just used the red light, green light monitor and a bioassay of red flower beetles to confirm mortality. The client was happy with those results. And then once we were able to get the proper sensor back, we were able to start tracking a little more carefully exactly what we were hitting in O2. We started that on August 27th, and by October 2nd, we had reached 0.14% O2. So that was a nice confirmation, and that to date is the lowest recorded oxygen level we've been able to maintain. Since our installation, in total, we've run 4 successful treatments in Mama Bubble and are currently running our 5th right now with our client. And our client schedule is running into August at this point. And we have not yet been able to fully test our baby bubble in this process, but we'll be looking forward to doing that soon. This combined with continued testing of our introduction techniques, we've been able to get our treatment time from introduction, from the start of the introduction to the end of our treatment to under 5 weeks total. And that's key. We're trying to tighten that and make it as short as possible. It does take quite a bit of time to get that nitrogen, the oxygen level low enough. At this point, most of our objectives have been met, with the exception that we have not yet been able to attempt a static treatment, which means a non-continuous flow treatment. But we're continuing to run tests and treatments, refining our procedures and policies with the goal to have the system running totally optimally by the fall of this year. And I think that's it. How am I doing for time?
You're doing great, Adam. Thanks so much for that. We did, if you are down, we got like 2 minutes. So we've got a couple of questions. That would be great because our Facebook Live viewers can't see the typed in questions, I think. So someone asked, can you tell us what were the indications of the inefficiency of the CO2 bubbles? And do you know why they were no longer efficient? I think that's something a lot of people would like to know.
Yeah, so the CO2 bubble is a PVC membrane, and it leaks. I mean, that's the fact. It's not as this chamber that Bill created was super tight, but the PVC, you know, with CO2, it's a much more forgiving system. We're essentially trying to reach between 60 and 80% CO2, and it's not a true anoxic system. It's actually the high level of CO2 that's doing the work, not the low oxygen. So we're actually only getting 4 to 6% O2 as opposed to much lower, which is required for nitrogen. So it does leak a little bit, but it's not a huge concern. We have lots of monitoring, but we saw elevated levels and we were using a lot more gas. We're starting using more gas to hit the numbers inside. So it was a slow leak, not hazardous, but enough that, like, wow, we're using more gas here to get the numbers and hold those numbers. And that's something I had seen before. 10 years earlier, we upgraded our CO2 system, and we saw the system beginning to fail. And I learned about that then, and we saw the same signs. And these systems have about a 10-year lifespan. So that's about right on track with the membrane's shelf life.
Thank you, Adam. That was really helpful. All right, I think we're going to move on to our next presentation. Next up, we have David Stevenson from the Canadian Centre for Architecture, who's going to talk to us about parasitic wasps versus clothes moths.
Thanks. I'm just going to load my presentation here.
Great.
Great. How's that looking? We're good? You can hear me?
Yep, we can hear you and it looks good.
Great. Thank you. So my name is David Stevenson. I'm a conservator with the Canadian Centre for Architecture in Montreal, Canada. Thanks to everyone who presented before me. Really interesting. I would have to say, Abby, that you've got me thinking about how to bring in our institution deeper into integrated pest management. I'm thinking about moth monopoly. We'll see where that goes. So ours is the story of a medium-sized institution with a medium-sized moth problem. And I hope that this story, which is still in process, will demystify the process of using parasitic wasps to combat a moth problem. It's something that we knew very little about, next to nothing about, before we started learning about it and before we decided to undertake it on a fairly small scale. So the title of my presentation, Tricho meat versus Tiniola Bisseliella, a story in process. So the Canadian Centre for Architecture is a museum, archive, library, and research center dedicated to international architecture and related discourses. We're located in Montreal, Canada. And we mount about 5 exhibits per year in different exhibition spaces. So the exhibit that introduced our moth problem was called The Things Around Us, ironically. And it opened in the fall of 2020, and it included a Mongolian yurt and some related accessories, as well as a large felt that covered the floor, a wool felt, and also a wool curtain. And all of these items were exposed to the open air without a vitrine or any kind of enclosure. So knowing that this could be a problem, of course, and before we brought these materials into the museum, we did a phosphine treatment of these objects and all objects of concern for a period of 10 days in a sealed truck on site. So the exhibit opened in September of 2020. And then after 10 days, the museum closed to the public for 4 months due to the pandemic shutdown. The exhibit reopened again to a limited public in February of 2021. And that's when we discovered that we had moths. A visitor actually reported it to one of our security staff, and we took it from there. So we took immediate action. The inspection of the galleries, of course, that was the first thing that we did. And it revealed that some horsehair rope was probably the source of the problem, that we immediately saw living moths and larvae and started asking ourselves, how could this happen? How did this get in? And of course, we continued with other things too. We continued to look around the galleries, and we saw other material of concern, and we removed the large floor felt. There was a very large floor felt, which I'll show you a picture of in a second, and an orange wool curtain that were removed from the galleries immediately, and we wrapped them in plastic and they were sealed. So 2 of these items were not collections material, so we were able to put these actually outside in -15°C temperature. And so here we have a photograph of the horsehair ropes. You can't see the larvae or the moths in there, but I can assure you they're there. Here we see the wool felt floor covering that was removed as well, quite a lot of it actually, a real delight for moths. There's a lot of surface area there. And here we have a wool curtain that was just an artifact that we had on display. And so we took immediate action in other ways too. We did a thorough vacuuming of all of the areas of the galleries. We did localized cryonite treatment in the cracks and crevices, and also in the storage area where there was more rolled felts. We disseminated pheromone sticky traps in the galleries and throughout the building. And we did this in conjunction with the pest control company that we were already using. We also alerted staff to become more aware of what they have in their offices. You know, if they saw anything that was keratinaceous, we told them what that is. We implored them to remove them or put them in Ziploc bags, and also to make sure their offices were clean and free of any kind of food remnants. And we did a walkthrough of the whole building. So in terms of the objects, we anoxically treated, we did a CO2 tent, any and all possibly affected materials for a period of 2 weeks in our garage. And so once we took them out of the garage, the items were thoroughly vacuumed with a HEPA filter. And we saw at that point that there was a lot of dead larvae and moths that were coming out of, in particular, coming out of the horsehair ropes. We put the treated back material back into the exhibit, This is in March of 2021. And we did that because we had seen at that point a decrease in the presence of moths in the galleries, both, not seeing them in the museum, not seeing them in the galleries, and also not seeing them in the traps that we put out, the sticky traps. And also we got in touch with the insect experts at the Canadian Conservation Institute for advice and species identification, and that was Tiniola bucelliella. And I would like to take this moment to say thank you very much to Tom Strang at CCI, who I believe is here and was of enormous help to us throughout this process. And of course, that should be good, but what it really resulted in was more moths. Asking ourselves, was the CO2 effective? And it was the idea that was offered to us was that the reason it might not have been effective, and this is the second treatment of this material, the first treatment being the phosphine, was that the temperature in the garage was perhaps slightly too low, and that, this is in a partially heated garage in the end of a Canadian winter, and it was just a bit below what the required 20 degrees Celsius that is needed for full efficacy in this way. So that's one possibility. And so instead of dealing with this problem further, we just decided to remove all the non-keratinaceous material and remove all moth food from the galleries. And so we substituted with those things with materials that were not keratinaceous. So fast forward a few months, the moth situation is improving. There's low but still present female moth counts in the sticky traps and a few live sightings. And a new challenge. Our curators told us, guess what? We're opening an exhibition in June of 2022 called Towards Home. It's going to have keratinaceous material in it. And this was sent off alarm bells. But we decided, because our moth count was low, that we would proceed anyway and do our best. So in consultation with the CCI, the idea of using the technique of parasitic wasps was presented to us, and that's Trichogramma. And we had not heard of this before. Now, just for anyone who doesn't know about this, they're parasitic because they lay their eggs amongst the eggs of moths and they prevent reproduction. So, a curious fact, the conservation lab and the adjacent offices were ironically where we were finding the most consistent low-level presence of moths. So we decided, why don't we try it? Why don't we try it specifically in the conservation lab and adjacent offices? Rationales included low cost, relatively low cost, relative ease of implementation. In fact, it's super easy. There's no risk to humans. Somebody brought up the possibility of people who are allergic to wasp bites, but we researched that and there is no risk. And no risk or no perceived risks to the collection or to the building. So, we also wanted to become more familiar with this process in case we need to use it again or in the future, or to upscale it if we have an uptick in moth count, moth numbers during the exhibition that I just described. So we brought in the parasites. We located a local supplier of Trichogramma, and they are called Tricho meats. That's the proprietary name. We calculated the volume space and the required number of cards for this space, and they arrived the next day chilled. We evenly distributed the 8 cards that were required for the specific area, and we kept the remaining wasps in the fridge. And here are the instructions. 8 weeks minimum, has to be between 18 and 30 degrees Celsius in an RH environment between 40 and 80% RH, and our environment certainly met those requirements. And so the wasps are tiny. I mean, they're really tiny. I knew they were going to be small, and they proved to be extremely small. You can see the tip of a pencil there, a colored pencil, and in relation how big the Trichogramma is. And also on the left there, that's 1 millimeter. So they're tiny. One negative aspect of it is that wasp dust that comes adjacent to the cards. So Over time, some wasps appear not to thrive and they kind of fall out of the card and onto the adjacent surfaces. And this requires cleaning up. So for this reason, it's best to keep a distance from artifacts. Kind of looks like ground pepper, and it accumulates with each card that you put down. So keep that in mind. So the question remains, how effective has it been? So we're now at week 8 of implementation, just in the conservation area, not the whole building. The routine monitoring of the sticky traps throughout the building indicates that our moth problem remains very low level. So we're well positioned to put up this exhibition in June, so long as we can maintain that. And also, we did discover 2 moths recently in a trap in the conservation area. Strange, we don't understand why, we're looking into it. And nothing else has been seen in the museum in any other trap or reported live sightings. So one thing I would say though is it's hard to determine the effectiveness when the previous point of comparison is similar. So if you see it's a consistent low level of infestation, it's somewhat discouraging because you want it to be 0, but you also don't know how how bad it could have been if you didn't do this, and that's the difficult thing to understand. There's a bit of faith involved. So there are a lot of different variables to consider when treating a small area within a larger building as well. You can't get into every air duct, you can't get into every nook and cranny of the building to know where the problem might remain. And the question arose too, have we always had very low level moth infestation, or presence, I should say, not infestation, but presence? And we just weren't aware of it. That's also a possibility. And should we also assume that it's really hard to fully eliminate this problem, that we may always have very low level moth infestation? So it's been a learning experience. No harm has been done, probably some good. It's hard to measure, but probably some good. Certainly we've learned, and we're in an opportunity like this to share information as well. And that's a good thing. Also, it's been a minor expenditure, hundreds of dollars only at this point. Of course, it would cost a lot more for a longer period of time or a larger space. It could get somewhat expensive. I would also say in summary that, we're battling blind. This is all happening out of sight, and success is determined by measuring moth counts over an extended period of time. And also, this is necessary to account for multiple life cycles of moths as well. I would give a mild criticism to the wasp pepper that seems to accumulate around the cards. Again, I think it's important to keep it away from artifacts. And having said that, I know that there are probably some people here or online, I should say, who are somewhat well versed in this, who have done it themselves. And I would give all of you an opportunity to reach out to me and share your experiences, or if you have any tips or advice that you can give me, you can reach me by email, or if you have any questions or comments, please present them now. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, David. That was really great. I think more and more places are using this, and hearing how it goes for each place is really helpful to the community. So thank you. We're right at 3:30. So I think if people have questions, if we can drop them in the chat, and then hopefully during the wrap up, we can make sure we get to everybody's questions. Our last presentation for the day is from Yurko Quatral and Leslie Silva from the MAPA Museum in Chile. And they're going to talk to us, I believe, in Spanish about the standardization of the level of biodeterioration by pests present in a Mapuche wood collection, which I'm really excited about, even though I will probably miss some of what happens, but this is really excellent. And Rachel may have more information for us, but here we are.
Before Yurko starts his presentation, we just wanted to say how excited we are because of the push by our Spanish group and the live Spanish site. We wanted to invite speakers to give their presentation in Spanish, even though I'm sure he would be able to do this in English as well. But we hope that this will be the start of additional programming that we'll be able to offer for the Spanish language group.
Muchas gracias, Rachel. Thank you for invitation. Muchas gracias por esta invitación. Estoy feliz de poder estar el día de hoy presentando el trabajo, ¿verdad?, que estamos haciendo un grupo importante de colegas en el Museo de Arte Popular Americano en Santiago de Chile. Es un placer para mí con todos ustedes, los colegas de países que vienen trabajando el problema desde niveles mucho más avanzados en estos casos. Y quiero presentar el día de hoy un proyecto en el que estamos tratando de estudiar, recuperar y estabilizar una colección referente a una colección de madera mapuche. En este sentido, ¿por qué nace el problema? El Museo de Arte Popular Americano es un museo que nace en el año 1936 aproximadamente en Chile, y este museo se ha convertido a lo largo de los años en un museo universitario que alberga una variedad de colecciones no tanto chilenas como latinoamericanas. En este sentido, el museo, y un museo latinoamericano universitario, tiene muchas precariedades, y en esta precariedad durante muchos años también ha sido los depósitos, los edificios de guarda de las colecciones. Este año principalmente es un evento particular porque por primera vez se puede hacer un cambio de edificio y a depósitos nuevos del museo. En este cambio a los depósitos nuevos del museo, de la universidad, el equipo de conservadores que está trabajando diariamente dentro de la colección ya no podía contener los niveles de infestación por termita que se estaba presentando. Termitas entre algunas otras plagas que están presentes dentro de las colecciones. Lamentablemente, los procesos de búsqueda de dinero para poder trabajar, equipo especializado, en primera instancia lo que nosotros proponemos, ¿cierto?, es siempre el estudio integral del manejo integral de plagas, y para ello también integramos, ¿cierto?, el estudio ambiental de cada una de las salas, contemplando el edificio en su totalidad, no solamente el depósito de las colecciones. También estudiamos la conservación, el estado de conservación de los depósitos, de cada uno de los depósitos. También estudiamos el estado de conservación de las colecciones más relevantes, las que tenían directamente relación con la plaga, y finalmente una integración de los datos para poder evaluar mediante el índice de deterioro o biodeterioro, en este caso, para cada uno de las salas y de las colecciones. Algunos de los principales características que vimos, aquí no hay mucho que evidenciar, ¿verdad? Saltaba a la vista todo el daño que estaba dentro de la sala, de los depósitos. Lamentablemente esto estaba un poco oculto debido a la gran cantidad de cajas que hay en el lugar. No era tan evidente como creemos. Esto estaba un poco oculto. Y a lo largo del tiempo, ¿verdad?, se fueron perdiendo maderas tanto externas como externas que estaban dentro del suelo, y que por lo tanto las termitas iban infestando año a año. Se fue evidenciando también características como las que vemos acá, la presencia de nidos, huevos en las paredes. También veíamos presencia de acerrín, que es cierto, son las degradaciones, las fecas de las termitas, y por lo tanto ya esto era un proceso evidente que estaba un poco fuera de control. Esto tenía era principalmente difícil, ya que también se veían la presencia de insectos que estaban recorriendo las colecciones, y por lo tanto estaban poniendo en riesgo, ¿verdad?, colecciones de madera bastante relevantes para el museo. Acá observamos en la figura fotografías que fueron tomadas hace 6 meses aproximadamente, cuando aparecieron esta última plaga, ¿verdad?, donde se evidencia la termita chilena, porque existe una termita chilena llamada Neotermes chilensis, ¿cierto?, que se asocia principalmente a la madera seca, en climas templados como tenemos en Chile, en temperaturas más bien altas y baja humedad. También se registró la termita subterránea, Reticulitermes flavipes, y también por lo tanto podemos en primera instancia identificar estas 2 especies de termitas que estarían presentes dentro tanto de los depósitos como en las salas. Dentro de todo estudio, ¿cierto? Del manejo integral de plagas, tenemos que tener control de la temperatura y de la humedad que está presente dentro de las colecciones. Y por lo tanto, llevamos hace algunos meses una medición exhaustiva, ¿verdad? Por medio de la data logger de la variación de la temperatura y la humedad presente dentro de los principales depósitos de las colecciones de madera. Lamentablemente, hace algún tiempo, debido al cambio climático, la aparición de plagas dentro de Chile y en Santiago de Chile específicamente están comenzando antes de la temporada habitual. Y es por eso, y esto tiene que ver porque la temperatura es más bien alta pero estable, y eso ha hecho que la aparición, ¿cierto?, de estas plagas sean mucho mayores en tiempos que no eran los habituales. Por otro lado, estamos viendo que un problema que se presenta dentro de este tipo de colecciones y en este tipo de ambientes es que la humedad es muy baja y tiende de alguna manera a una deshidratación de los materiales, sobre todo en piezas patrimoniales que son de origen orgánico. También en la estrategia estamos utilizando el reconocimiento, ¿cierto?, del daño por plaga en distintas zonas de las salas, en distintos depósitos, obteniendo información, ¿cierto?, de las plagas de rastreros que se están moviendo dentro de las distintas salas. Bajo esta premisa de la identificación de plagas, tenemos que entender que en esta temporalidad en la cual se está poniendo los cebos, ya no se registran termitas, porque ya fueron eliminadas, ya fueron sacadas, ¿cierto?, mediante limpieza. Y lo que estamos tratando de encontrar acá es otro tipo de plaga, que es un problema en Chile. Se realizó un mapeo de las dos salas más importantes donde se encuentra la colección de Isla de Pascua y la colección de la sala mapuche, donde observamos que la sala mapuche, al lado izquierdo, presenta un mayor deterioro en este mapeo en zonas de madera donde fueron degradada la madera. Hay una pérdida parcial y total de algunos sectores de la madera por termitas. Por lo tanto, puede que en estos lugares estén los nidos de cada una de estas termitas. Como les decía anteriormente, no solamente a mí me preocupa no solamente los objetos, sino que también me preocupa la salud de los trabajadores. Una araña particularmente que se encuentra en Chile, en Sudamérica, en México también, es una araña que se llama Loxosceles laeta. Esta araña, llamada comúnmente araña de rincón, es muy peligrosa y habitualmente, y la nombro en esta presentación porque en Chile aparece muy seguido y en gran cantidad, como en este museo, aparece frecuentemente. Lamentablemente esta araña tiene repercusiones en la salud del ser humano bastante graves, que puede ir de una necrosis, como vemos en la imagen, hasta la muerte. Y por eso no solamente tenemos que preocuparnos de contener la plaga de termitas, sino que también tenemos que contener y tener mucho cuidado en la revisión de los objetos de las colecciones debido a este tipo de araña que ya se encuentra presente en la colección. Para la evaluación de las salas, para la comparación de las salas, para la comparación del deterioro de las salas, utilicé el índice de biodeterioro, utilizando principalmente características como la evaluación de hongos activos en las salas, plagas activas como las que vimos de termitas, humedad del material, suciedad, acumulación, fecas presentes en forma de acerrín, perforaciones, rotura de la madera, delaminaciones presentes, fragilidad también de la madera y presencia de algunas colonias cuando se puede identificar claramente. Acá observamos un mapeo del índice de biodeterioro que realicé para cada de las 9 salas que se estudiaron en el museo, donde vemos que las salas del nivel 1, donde se encuentra el depósito de Isla de Pascua y depósito mapuche, vemos que son las que tienen un muy mal estado de conservación en relación con las del nivel 2, donde se encuentra el laboratorio, la investigación, el archivo y la biblioteca, las cuales tienen un muy buen estado de conservación. Este panorama nos indica la realidad del museo, nos indica dónde poner la atención y dónde efectivamente realizar las actividades de limpieza, desinfección y de fumigación. Una vez que ha sido determinada las principales salas que son problemas de la plaga, el equipo de conservación del museo pone en cuarentena aisladas ciertos tipos de materiales y de objetos más importantes de la colección mapuche que estaban directamente con la plaga de termitas. La mayoría de estos objetos tiene presencia de algunos signos de infestación, agujeros, etcétera. Por lo tanto, fueron aislados en una sala limpia, alejada de los otros depósitos, para que esté en revisión y posterior desinfección. Siempre es complejo, una vez que ya uno ha analizado el ambiente, ¿verdad? El edificio, los depósitos, tenemos que hacernos cargo de la colección. Lamentablemente, y sobre todo en una realidad latinoamericana, cuando el dinero es escaso, ¿cierto? Tenemos que hacer magia con las instituciones para poder hacer un trabajo de buen nivel, formar el criterio de identificación y sobre todo pensando en la intervención, que muchas veces es muy poco adecuada para los materiales orgánicos. Siempre es complejo, como le decía yo, la revisión de grandes colecciones, y es por eso que hace mucho tiempo que vengo realizando el estudio de las colecciones por medio de la estandarización específica en materiales de la colección, como en este caso, para obtener un estado de conservación específico de la pieza, pero a su vez cuantificando el deterioro de cada una de las piezas y el estado el índice de deterioro de cada una de ellas. Para esta colección en particular, nosotros estandarizamos el método con dos piezas muy significativas de la colección mapuche, el rewe que observan acá, que es una escalera machi, muy representativa del pueblo mapuche y que se utiliza en ceremonias con la machi de los pueblos nativos chilenos. Es muy emocionante poder estar al lado de un objeto de esta envergadura espiritual muy bonito y agradezco al museo también de poder tener la oportunidad de poder resguardarlo. Esperemos que todos los tratamientos y todo el estudio que se está haciendo vaya a buen puerto. También el chemamul que se muestra en el costado derecho, ambas son figuras antropomorfas que tienen directamente relación con ceremonias espirituales, ¿cierto? Y que son usados mayormente en el chemamul en cementerios y tienen algunas significancias dependiendo del tiempo. La evaluación, por lo tanto, del deterioro se realizó midiendo, observando, ¿cierto? En este objeto principalmente, la presencia de galerías, la presencia de huevos, la presencia de larvas, insectos vivos o muertos, acerrín, fecas, la delaminación de la madera, la fragilidad de la madera y algunos otros deterioros que puede ser específico de este tipo de materiales. Es por eso que el estudio fue bastante exhaustivo de forma externa y en este caso del rewe, que es un ejemplar de gran magnitud, también tenía que ser estudiado de forma interna, porque aquí estuvimos haciendo algunas pruebas con luz ultravioleta también para observar algunas intervenciones antes que ha tenido esta pieza para hacer, tiene algunas modificaciones, ha sido intervenida anteriormente. La evaluación de este objeto también tuvo que ser de forma interna, ya que poseía un hueco hacia el interior y por lo tanto nosotros mediante una cámara estereoscópica revisamos, ahí está Leslie, ¿cierto?, trabajando, buscando alguna evidencia de infestación, ¿verdad?, de plagas, de huevos, y para tomar muestras y poder verlas al microscopio. Una vez que se realizó esa intervención, o sea, una intervención que no toma, es solamente observar, tomamos muestra, ¿verdad? Y pudimos observar la presencia que había en el interior, por ejemplo, de túneles, agujeros, túneles, larvas, habían huevos, termitas, huevos de termitas, encontramos fecas, encontramos insectos secos, caparazones, algunos restos que estaban en el interior de este objeto. Entonces, todo esto nos indicaba que esta forma sí presentaba un tipo de infestación y que tenía que realizarse un tipo de limpieza mucho más profunda e incluso una desinsectación en el caso de toda la evidencia que nosotros estamos encontrando. Una vez que ya tenemos todos estos datos, nosotros tenemos que en una plantilla andamos para poder analizar toda la colección. Nosotros cuantificamos, ¿cierto?, la presencia o ausencia de estos agentes de deterioro que se encuentran dentro del objeto por objeto y vamos obteniendo el índice de deterioro de forma particular, en donde podemos evidenciar en este caso un rehue que se encuentra en una forma, en un estado de conservación regular, y un chemamul que se encuentra en un estado de conservación un poco más malo. Por lo tanto, esta caracterización nos da una cuantificación del biodeterioro por objeto en primera instancia y segundo del grado de biodeterioro por objeto y también por clasificación. Esta cuantificación nos ayuda a tener un criterio total de la colección. Estos datos, por lo tanto, son muy importantes en la toma de decisiones acertadas en relación al número de objetos que vamos a intervenir y dependiendo de su estado de conservación. Por lo tanto, alguna de las principales conclusiones es que la estandarización de metodologías y procedimientos ayuda a la formación del criterio para el estudio de colecciones específicas. La utilización e implementación del índice de deterioro o de biodeterioro, en este caso que fue estandarizado, ayuda a entregar una respuesta muy certera del tipo de intervención requerida y a tal número de piezas. La implementación ayuda a la cuantificación de los deterioros de la misma colección, dando certeza del problema real de la colección. Esta implementación de estudios de bajo costo para la investigación de colecciones ayuda en la mejora de planes de preservación y conservación institucional a largo plazo. Muchas gracias y agradezco a mi colega Leslie Silva, con la cual trabajamos en esta etapa del proyecto, y al equipo de conservación del Museo de Arte Popular Americano, MAPA, de la Universidad de Chile, y a su directora, Nuri González. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. Even without knowing Spanish, I was able to get a lot out of the presentation, and I think it's important. I think we all think it's important to reach a broader community than just who we already reach. So thank you so much for doing that. I think that we had a couple questions we didn't answer from previous chats, and I think we've got some more coming in. I think someone earlier asked about the rodent poisons that attracted beetles, but I think Michael actually covered that pretty well in his. I think we had a question for Adam about the price points of the different nitrogen chambers. Adam, could you jump on and talk about that a little bit?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I don't think I have those price points. And in fact, I'm not sure if I can give a quote because Bill Smith, this is kind of the first time ever trying this. So if I gave you those numbers, I think they're probably going to change pretty soon, actually. So you're welcome to, was that Krista? Krista, you can contact me, send me an email,
Okay.
We can chat more about, I think we're going to be talking more about other bubbles coming down the line. So I think we'll be solidifying those prices soon.
It's always interesting to hear how much those are. So
yeah, this is the first one made like this, so we're still figuring out the real cost.
Gotcha.
I just wanted to bring up too, Krista, that it's not just the bubble, it's the nitrogen generator and all that equipment plays a big part of that too. So the bubble's just one, the actual physical bubble is just one part of that too.
it's likely out of reach for many people, but it's still nice to know. Yeah.
Okay, so I can say more than 6 figures for the whole operation.
And actually,
No, 6 figures, yes, sorry, not more.
I want to pipe in that when Ralph Wiegand and Bill were part of the group a few years ago, they talked about making those bubbles for use with argon or other gases. And the bubble itself is not is one cost, but then there's the cost for the monitoring equipment and the gas being piped in. But those bubbles, I believe that Bill has made a number of different prototypes at different price points, so to speak, and has them sort of as samples at his place in Rochester.
Thank you. And Krista, while you're right here, did you want to ask Yurko your question for us?
What? Which
you
one?
You dropped a question in the chat for Yurko.
Yes, I was just hablaste con la gente mapuche.
Hola, Krista, ¿cómo estás? Un gusto.
Estoy bien. ¿Y tú?
Sí, muy bien, gracias. Muy bien, gracias. Este trabajo yo lo vengo tomando ahora solamente desde el punto de vista de la conservación. Se han hecho mucho trabajo histórico en torno a la colección mapuche. Existe en el museo un estudio bastante exhaustivo acerca de todo lo espiritual y patrimonial que se encuentra dentro del depósito, dentro de la colección. Si quieres hay una página que yo puse en la presentación, ahí tú puedes ver, quizás te la puedo mandar específicamente, donde hay investigaciones, libros al respecto. Se ha hecho un trabajo bastante riguroso y muy bonito.
Gracias.
All right, I think we don't have too many other questions. I think on Facebook, there was a question about the health differences and safety differences between CO2 and nitrogen. I don't know if anyone here feels like they want to bring that, have an answer to that, or try to talk about that.
I can talk to that a little bit. I mean, certainly with the CO2, you have to monitor it very carefully. CO2 can be quite hazardous, and the concentration levels that you need to reach in the ambient air, it's like 0.04% CO2 in what we're breathing. And in that chamber, we're reaching 60 to 80% CO2. So that is, obviously quite lethal, and it needs to be monitored very carefully. We had redundant systems, CO2 monitoring unit that was attached to a ventilation system, so that it even got to 0.15%, you would get a beep, and if it got to 0.3%, it would trip the ventilation system. Anything above, I think, 0.5, you start not feeling well. And so we had a very good redundant system. And we have to very carefully vent out the CO2 when we end it to make sure that it's safe. But with nitrogen, absolutely no issue whatsoever. We just crack it right open. Nitrogen is 78%, I believe, that of the air that we breathe. So we're bringing it up to 99 point what have you. And so when you open that, it just dissipates quickly, and there's zero hazard whatsoever. You don't even feel, it doesn't even feel stuffy in the room when you open it up. So big difference there for health and safety.
Thank you, Adam. I think that's helpful for a lot of people looking into these different things. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to unmute and ask? Well, it sounds like most of our questions have been answered. If anyone has a question, they can feel free to raise their hand if you think of it while we're doing our wrap up. Rachel, would you like to bring us to a close?
I am so grateful for all of our presenters, with all of the changing plans with COVID. We were a bit behind the schedule, and people really stepped up and prepared their presentations on short notice, and we are all grateful. I want to give a special shout out not only to Matt and Genevieve, but importantly to Lynn Jones, who is the technical mastermind underneath last year and this year's public presentation session. Thank you, Lynn. We're grateful to you. Again, Leon is wearing the white version of the Museum Pests t-shirt. I've got the black version. I encourage you, the link in the chat is available. Our donations page is back up live. It also links to our homepage. If you appreciated the ability to log in and see these presentations, know that you'll be able to hear the recording or download them. We are grateful for any support that you can give, and we hope to hear from some of you, and in the hope that you'll join us at a future meeting. Again, all of the work that you see online is a work in progress. Our group comes together to help solve our own needs with a like-minded community. So Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you to our moderators and speakers, thank you to all of our working group participants who make this all possible. And we hope you'll spread the word. This will be up online soon, and we hope to see you next year.
And of course, thanks, Rachel and Matt.
It's a pleasure.
You bet. Always a pleasure.
All right. Goodbye, everyone on Facebook.